Lesson 13, Prelude. Life itself is a transcendent adventure. At its best, it is tremendously difficult. It is a huge mountain of unknown height whose top is hidden in an impenetrable veil which every man must climb. From that upward journey of life there is no escape for anyone, and no man knows what he must face on that lifelong climb up its tortuous path of blazed and unmarked path, which man must tread in light or dark, and in the dark often loses way and pitch headlong into stark tragedy, which may be any man's the very next moment after happiness and glory will seem to have been forever attained. There are wonderful green meadows and forested paths on every man's mountain. There are babbling brooks and springs to quench one's thirst, and fruit-laden trees and luscious gardens, and there is a music of the singing of birds in the forest, and laughter and joy, and grief and death next door. And just beyond, where a bride is lifted across her happy threshold, a blind man gropes in the dark, and a once proud scholar meets misery face to face and knows not what to do with it. Knows not what to do with it. Therein lies the tragedy of life, the pitiful fact. You know not what to do with it. There is death and the dark and the fear and dread of death in the dark for him who knows not eternal life, for him who knows not that there is no death, and he who fears and dreads death in the dark knows not what to do with his fear of death and the dark. You must face the unforeseen of your mountain. You must face a danger, for its paths are not all smooth. You must surmount the steep cliffs and lose your way in the dark. You must face failure as well as success, loneliness and frustration, lack of husband, home, children, love, or loss of them, and death or tragedy, and from your own weakness, or from treachery or trusted friends, and know what to do with it. Yes, that is the tragedy in not knowing. Man on his mountain of life, not knowing his mountain, not knowing what to do when a wall of mountain faces him, not knowing how to surmount it, having no compass to guide him, no light of knowing, out there in the dark of not knowing. Woman on the mountain, terribly alone, frustrated and alone, not knowing what to do with it. Boy on his mountain, homeless, penniless, helpless, for he knows not what to do with it. But I know a man who has not been able to move for 30 years, blind, paralyzed, speech and hearing alone, left to him, yet radiantly happy, successful, known, loved and honored, paying his way and giving much to the world, for he knows what to do with it. I know hundreds of men and women who have faced insurmountable hurdles and know what to do with them. I have faced many of them myself and knew exactly what to do with them, and doubtless you have also. Why such despair? Why such misery? Why fear anything in all this glorious universe of God's making, and your making, where naught but life is, where you know that you are existent as you in all creating things, and cannot be alone, nor unhappy, nor defeated, nor in any way stopped from your joyful climb up your mountain of life to the light of knowing, which will illumine your path all of its glorious way, if you but know what to do with life as you meet it ever in the light, in which there is no dark. Balance and this divided universe. Knowledge alone will help us meet our problems squarely and turn those who are seemingly not good into good, or those which seemingly hurt us into helpful ones which glorify us. Everything which happens to us is God. Knowledge of God's balanced universe will tell us that if all of our little ills arise from unbalance, and God's universe cannot be unbalanced, then we can balance our ills with that knowledge. Until we do balance them, they are but experiences which are our lessons in life. Until we do balance them, we must regard them as but stepping stones across the stream of life. Let us get down to the fundamentals. Why do you or I have problems? Why does anything happen to you or me? Why do we go to sleep, wake up, go to work, breathe, talk, eat, think, dress ourselves, catch colds, have pains, aches of the body from ills of the body, aches of the heart from loneliness or from something some friend said about us, or something we did to hurt a friend? Why does the wind blow east now, west tomorrow, or blow at all? Why the Gulf Stream, or the Antarctic current, or polar ice cap, or jungle heat? Why do I live and die, and am joyful and sorrowful? Why am I here at all? What is it all about? Everything changing, always changing. Why? Why? I will tell you in a very few words and amplify them in the following postulates and axioms. The answer lies in the divine Trinity, which you are. It lies in your knowledge of the balanced relation between the one, which you are, and the divided two, which your body is, and it lies in your ability to manifest these relations in balance with each other. Postulates. 1. Your mind belongs to the undivided and unchanging universe of still magnetic light of all-knowing. 2. The undivided is one, the one centering cause of the divided two. 3. Your mind is you. Nothing happens or can happen to you. 4. You center your thinking. Your thinking extends from you, but your thinking is not you. 5. Your thinking is divided and changing. Anything can happen to your thinking because your thinking is divided and changing. But you control your thinking. You can balance it and be joyous, or unbalance it and be miserable. You can make wise decisions and grow strong, or unwise ones and make failure for yourself. You can steal for your greedy self and be shut away from men, or you can give of your loving self and be honored of men. Your thinking is under your control. Your thinking expresses your desire. You are what you think. You make yourself into the image of your desire. You can be whatever you desire to be. What you now are is the product of your thinking. Likewise, what the world is today is the product of world thinking. Man has always had control over his thinking. He has had free will to do as he chooses. The world will be a wonderful and beautiful, and people in it will be happy, peaceful, and prosperous when the world chooses to think beauty, love, and the brotherhood of man. Until then, the world will be as chaotic as world thinking is chaotic. The world could transform itself overnight if it could but transform its thinking overnight. Likewise, you could transform yourself overnight by balancing your thinking. 6. Your body is a record of your thinking. Therefore, your body is divided and changing. Anything can happen to your body because your body is divided and changing. It is borning and dying. It is integrating and disintegrating. It is subjected to every effect arising from interchange between all other divided and changing bodies in the universe. Remember also that your body is an extension of you. It manifests you through your thinking, but it is not you. You control it as one unit of creation, but it is subject to all other units of creation and all effects of motion everywhere. For any body anywhere is an extension of every body everywhere. If your thinking produces a perfect body and a tragedy of your environment mangles your body, leaving it hopelessly crippled, then you will know what to do about it if you control your body. Otherwise, it will control you and make you forget your divinity. It will make you a purely physical thing, whining through life from self-pity, driving love from your door, and making you poor indeed. If, however, you can knowingly say, I and my Father are one, nothing can happen to your body which you cannot balance, and thus live gloriously in the light which you are. 7. You are not a purely physical thing. Your body is not you. It is but a complex state of motion. You are the one spiritual being. Nothing has happened to you. Nothing can happen to you. Axioms. 1. The undivided light of knowing is cause. The divided light waves of thinking idea into thought bodies is effect. 2. Every effect in this universe, every happening, every event, and every experience takes place only between divided bodies which are oppositely conditioned. 3. All effects are manifested by two-way interchange of motion between oppositely conditioned, divided, and unbalanced bodies. 4. Every thought which extends from mind has a body, a divided body formed and patterned in the image of the thought. 5. Whether or not the thinker gives his thoughts a visible material body, the thought itself is embodied in him. The moment he thinks the thought, it has a patterned body, which is instantly a part of his own body. 6. No man can think invisible thoughts. Every thought of every man is a created thought body, which fashions the patterned form of the visible man. Invisible thoughts of beauty become visible in the body of the thinker. A man who thinks music looks like his thoughts. Likewise, a cynic, brute, pessimist, sensualist, or kindly bishop look like their thoughts. Their invisible thoughts are visible in their bodies. 7. All thoughts, emotions, events, experience, and happenings of every nature in your life, and of everything in all creation have bodies. Nature is concerned only in the making of divided, changing bodies to record and divide the changing thoughts which created those bodies. 8. You as an individual are concerned only with the making of divided, changing thought bodies in your image. That is all you ever do. 9. The thoughts and thought bodies you create are first a part of your body. If you repeat those thoughts in other bodies, those other bodies are extensions of your body. They are your creation. 10. Your creations are universal. Your thoughts are universal. They are universally extended. Every thought to which you give a body is extended to every other body in the universe and becomes a part of it. It is a part of me and of your neighbor, of the Zulu, the tiger in his jungle, of the mountain, yea, of the violet in the meadow, or of the farthermost star. The radio can prove that for you. 11. You cannot have a thought which is your own alone. You cannot divide the universe for yourself. You cannot have anything for yourself which you have not first given. That which you believe is the image of that which you have given. 12. If your thought is out of balance, your body is out of balance in the measure of your unbalanced thought. Likewise, the whole universe is out of balance in the measure of your thought. You cannot unbalance God's universe. The whole universe moves to adjust itself to your unbalanced thought. A child moves the Pleiades and all the stars of heaven with his slightest movement. 13. You cannot have an unbalanced thought, nor perform an unbalanced action without the measure of that unbalanced thought and action returning to you in its own image. God gives you the right of free will to think any thought or perform any action, but he holds the right to balance your unbalance by an equal reaction. 14. In the making of thought bodies to manifest our knowing in the pattern of our desires, we have what we call good experiences which make us happy, or we have bad experiences which make us unhappy. Our good experiences arise from our knowledge of how to produce balanced thought bodies. Conversely, our bad experiences stem from our ignorance of balance in us and how to extend balance from us in our thinking. Conclusion. As it is our sole purpose and occupation in life to create divided and balanced thought bodies in order to have good experiences and happy lives, we will take another simple step in the unfolding of God's plan and explain fully how God seemingly divides the unconditioned universal equilibrium into pairs of opposite condition in order to create the wave of motion from which thought bodies are constructed. We will give many simple examples and diagrams of familiar effects so that you will recognize the fact that you produce thought bodies in exactly the same way that God produces them. The only difference being that God keeps his creating body in balance, but man rarely does. During my illumination, God commanded that I write down the one supreme law of balance for cosmic man. I herewith give it to you as he gave it to me for you, and it is written in the divine Iliad. God's law of balance. Great art is simple. My universe is great art, for it is simple. Great art is balanced. My universe is consummate art, for it is balanced simplicity. My universe is one in which many things have majestic measure, and again another many have measures too fine for sensing. Yet I have not one law for majestic things and another law for things which are beyond the sensing. I have but one law for all my opposed pairs of creating things, and that law needs but one word to spell it out. So hear me when I say that the one word of my one law is balance. And if man needs two words to aid him in his knowing of the working of that law, these two words are balanced interchange. If man still needs more words to aid his knowing of my one law, give to him another one, and let these three words be rhythmic, balanced interchange. No messenger of the light has as yet given this law to man, for man has yet been unable to comprehend it. If he had been able to comprehend it and practice it, he would have built a balanced civilization instead of a chaotic one. To the extent that you understand it, you will build a balanced life of happiness and masterly achievement, because you will be working knowingly with God when you do fully comprehend and practice the law of balance. No matter what happens to your own little universe, you will know what to do with it. Rhythmic, balanced interchange between every pair of opposite conditions in this divided thought wave universe is the inviolate law which must be obeyed by man and by nature. Nature persistently violates it, and nature instantly pays the price of its violation in storms, tornadoes, crashing avalanche, and tragedy of stellar cataclysm. Man persistently violates it and pays the price of his violation in his crashing business failures, enmities, unhappiness, and illness. All the tornadoes of Earth cannot affect the balance of Earth, for balance in the universe cannot be upset. The Earth continues in its balanced relation to all planets with such exactness that its position, its relation to them, can be determined at any time to the split second. If the Earth disobeyed this law by the slightest variance, its oceans would sweep its continents clear of all living and growing things. Neither can your disobedience to that law affect your balance in respect to the universe, for God balances every unbalanced action of yours with an equal and opposite reaction until you do balance it, as you sometimes, someday must. But as God said in his message to you, all men will come to me in due time, but theirs is the agony of waiting. That agony is the price you would be paying for your own disobedience to the law, and the disobedience may not be willful, but due entirely to ignorance of the way God builds divided thought bodies. I quote God's message to man in this respect as written in the divine Iliad. When man knoweth me in him, then am I he. And again I quote, I the one am not divided into two as pair of opposites of me. I divide the two extensions of my thinking, but I am not my thinking, nor am I two. When man thinketh man alone, denying me in him, then is man's image man's, not mine and man's, for the pattern of my balanced rhythmic images within man may not be seen in him, nor may the glory of my light be seen in him or known by him. When man thinketh me, through knowing me, then is he patterned by my image, and I am he. When man thinketh me in him, then is man's imbalance absolute. When man so thinketh, then hath he all power that I, thy father mother of all creation, hath. End of lesson. Lesson 14. Once again I must talk to you as simply as though you were small children, for any thinking which is new must be presented simply. I want to tell you how bodies are made in balance with all other bodies, how God makes them and you make them. But if I just tell you that all bodies are electric wave vibrations packed close together to make solids and spread farther and farther apart to make liquids and gases, I will be stating the truth, but you will not know specifically what I mean. You will but get a general, vague idea of it unless I tell you the way you teach your children to read, by starting in with lettered blocks. Vague general understanding is not sufficient. You must know specifically how bodies are made and kept in balance, and their every other function kept in balance. For mankind is ever walking a tightrope and depending absolutely upon his balancing extensions, and it is so easy to crash by loss of balance. The trouble with life is that all of us are continually losing our balance in hundreds of little things which almost pass unnoticed. But it is their sum total which gauges both our safety and our progress. You must know specifically how bodies are made and balanced by equators and God's watchful eye in the magnetic poles of all bodies, whether they be uncreated thought bodies or physically created material bodies, because that is all you are doing all of your life. What you are and what you create depends upon what you know. Ignorance never gets you far. Mankind knows less about creating bodies and balancing them, the life principle, self-energizing, or self-vitalizing than any other subject. Man knows how to use the energy for his machines expressed by falling waters, but has very little knowledge of how to use the energy of the universal heartbeat to vitalize and balance his own body, and the bodies he is forever creating with his thinking. You make bodies because you desire to create them. You make them out of light, electricity, and motion directed by your will. You pattern them in your own image. The life you give them is your life, as their bodies are also your body. They are extensions of your body, as your body is an extension of God's body. You made your own body by your desire to extend it from God's body. God made your body with you by the universal desire to manifest the man idea as part of God's one whole idea of creation. God could not create your body with you without desire to do so. Desire of mind is the motivating force which energizes all creation through the universal heartbeat of concentrative, decentrative thought pulsations. Likewise, you cannot create bodies without the desire to do so. Your desire is your motivating force. All creating bodies are extensions of other creating bodies. You are now and always have been creating your own body. You cannot extend that which you have not first created. neither can you extend more than you have first created. All thought bodies extend from your thought body by the desire of your mind to create thought bodies, manifest the measure of your knowing. Your thinking can never manifest more than you know, no matter how great is your desire. If you realize the fact that you are forever creating bodies by the use of electricity, energy, light, and motion, and are balancing them with the immediate and universal environments, you must know what these tools are that you are using, and you must know them as thoroughly and as dynamically as you know how to multiply 2 by 2 and conclude rightly that the answer is 4. I have not used this simple analogy without a good reason, and that reason is there no more difficult for you to fully comprehend all of these essentials for the building of thought bodies than it is for you to multiply 2 by 2, for God's working principle is as simple as that. Science should be as simple as God's one working principle is, but science is extremely complex because it is unaware of that one working principle as manifested in the Divine Trinity. I tell you all this because you are afraid of science. I know that you are because hundreds of you have told me so. Why are you afraid of it? Because of the tremendous complexity of the science you have read, a man-made complexity which has no relation to nature. This is the reason you are afraid of it. I do not blame you for being afraid of it when the ordinary, everyday layman reads about the electrons, protons, photons, neutrons, positrons, and newly discovered particles in endless array, and when he is told of the 92 elements of matter and their complex structure, all of it couched in a terminology which is like Greek to him and seems beyond his comprehension, I do not wonder that he shies away from it. But I say to you that there is nothing so complex in the field of science, whether in electrodynamics, chemistry, astronomy, or any other branch of science, that anyone of the intelligence required to be a good pianist or composer, good housewife, or good business executive could not as easily master. I also say to you that these many varieties of particles which frighten you away from science are all of them the same particle of light, corpuscles, which seem to be different because they are in different parts of their wave fields and are, therefore, differently conditioned as to their polarity. And so would you seem to be different kinds of humans if some cosmic giant photographed you under his microscope one day when you trudged in knee-deep snow with your fur coat, hat, and mittens on, then later photographed you as a water animal with bathing trunks and a sun hat. Chemistry is as simple as music. The octave tones, harmonies, and rhythms are the same. I could teach you chemistry from the musical octave or the color spectrum as well as I could from the Mendeleev table. And I will say the same for mathematics or mechanics. When I have taken you behind the scenes where God's cosmic cinema is being played, you will find no complexity there at all. You will find it when you thoroughly know the working principle of the Divine Trinity, so thoroughly that your own consciousness is always the centering zero of knowing, from which all pairs of opposite expressions extend. You will suddenly realize that you have all knowledge, for the answer to every question as to cause and principle is within you. When you have arrived at that point, you will find yourself to be a very different kind of person. You will, from now on, find yourself more and more dependent upon yourself, more sure of yourself. You will find yourself talking less to dissipate your forming thought bodies and thinking more. The time will gradually come when you would not think of asking any other person on earth for advice upon anything whatsoever which you are planning to achieve or create. You will find yourself going to books only for information, or to other men for technical skills, or to encyclopedic recordings which are not knowledge, but never for cause or principle. For that knowledge is already within you, and those lessons should awaken in you sufficiently for you to recognize your own cosmic unity with the Omniscient One. The greater your cosmic awareness, the greater your cosmic consciousness, which means all-knowing. So let us begin all over again at the beginning in our search for cosmic omniscience. Remember that we are in thought-divided universe of thought-created bodies. And by bodies I mean sounds as well as suns, the east wind as well as the insect, the electrons as well as the elephant, the violet as well as the human, the song of the bird as well as the bird, and the machine as well as the inventor of it. So you now know what I mean by bodies. Next, let us remember that the thought-divided universe means the division of thinking into its two pulsations of motion between concentration and decentration. Next, let us never lose track of the fact that all of the pairs of opposites in all this universe of effect are just other words for, or the mechanics of, concentration and decentration. In other words, concentration and decentration are the root words for all pairs of opposites, whether heat and cold, gravitation and radiation, or any other pair. Next, remember also that all physical effects are but the electrical records of these two mental effects. As a final thought in connection with what is now coming, let me again repeat the fact that all opposites of every pair are born out of each other simultaneously and becomes the other sequentially. These are the thoughts we must now expand and clarify. As a first step, try to imagine God's mind thinking his one idea of the father-motherhood of creation. His knowing of that one idea is formless in the undivided light. To give it form, he must divide the one equilibrium by extending it from its one balanced condition and give it two equally unbalanced conditions. As I have before stated, the universal equilibrium is zero and cannot be divided, but it can seem to be divided by establishing an equator between two conditions which together add up to zero. Now imagine God's hands pulling the invisible one idea of father-motherhood apart to divide it into two visible forms, each of which are one half of the one idea. Instead of the invisible, formless, and changeless one idea, God has thus created pairs of oppositely conditioned halves of many ideas. That is what is called polarity, which means a division of one condition into two equal opposites. I have used the male and female figure to symbolize a division of all things into pairs of opposite sex mates, but you must thoroughly understand that it is only a symbol. For every creating thing, and even the uncreated thoughts of things, are divided into pairs of opposite sex mates. By this I mean minerals, metals, liquids, vapors, and everything in matter and space. Remember always that this is a sexed electric universe, and all motion everywhere is sex interchange between opposite sex mates. There you have it. The whole of creation consists of pairs of oppositely conditioned mates, sex mates, polarized halves of each other. Also you have the whole cause of balanced or unbalanced motion, and a basic understanding of electricity. Let us consider each of these separately. We will first consider motion and what happens when motion is balanced or unbalanced. Before God polarized the one into pairs, there could not possibly be any motion whatsoever. In an equilibrium, motion is impossible. It must be divided and extended from a mutual equator before motion is possible. For example, consider yourself in a closed room or even temperature. There is no movement in it anywhere, for it is an equilibrium, and motion is impossible in an equilibrium. If you put a bar of hot iron at one end and a cake of ice at the other end, we have upset that equilibrium. It now follows that the principle of the divine Trinity, the one condition, has been divided into two opposite conditions, the hot iron being a positive condition and the ice being the negative condition. Instead of the entire room being in equilibrium, an equator has been developed between the 2 points. These two opposite conditions immediately reach out for the other toward their mutual equator. They each desire the other to find balance through each other, as all unbalanced pairs of opposites continually do. That desire is sex desire for balance. Sex desire is electric and is manifested by an electric interchange of inward-outward, outward-inward pulsations, which we call an electric current. The electric current will continue until both conditions have been equalized. All motion will have then ceased and the room will be completely in equilibrium as before. It will be in the condition which we call dead in a storage battery. It will have lost its polarity just as your self-starter loses it by becoming depolarized when its opposite conditions have been equalized. Now consider the separated father and mother condition in this light. The one has been pulled apart to create two. The two conditions are positive and negative, a compressed condition and an expanded one which correspond with the concentration and decentration of the thought pulsations which cause them. Now imagine that the pulling apart of the one into two caused a strain or tension, as though there were many electric bands which held the two together as the invisible one. To pull them apart caused these bands to stretch against a resistance which pulled the other way. The effect of the two-way tension is the answer to what electricity is. The two-way desire to equalize that tension is the answer to what sex is, and the two-way interchange which is necessary to effect that equalization is what motion is. For when that equalization takes place, electric current ceases, sex desire ceases, and motion ceases. Thinking divides the one balance and extends it. Electricity is the resultant effect, which arises from division of balance and its extension to two balanced conditions. Without desire for creative expression through thinking, there could be no sex division. Without desire for balance, there could be no sex desire. Without attainment of balance, there could be no repetition. Without repetition, there could be no continuity. Your mind, which centers your body, is eternal and never changing. Your body, which extends from your mind, is eternally repetitive and forever changing. You always have a body as you always have a mind. Basis of all of life's problems. The previous lesson ended with God's law of balance for this new age of cosmic man. The answer to everything which is good or bad in your life lies in the measure in which you practice the law of balance, and your ability to practice it lies in the measure of your understanding of that law. If you face a crashing defeat, you must know how to meet it. The best way to do this is to search within your consciousness to find how or where you have violated the law of balance in the principle of the Divine Trinity. At such a time, never ask the solution outside of yourself by telling a living soul of your problem who is not able to take your problem as his own. Your husband or wife may be the only one who is capable of becoming one with you in your problems, and that only if your mate is one with you in all things. Seek the solution within yourself. The answer is within yourself. Seek aloneness with your own soul and talk to God about it. The more you know about his law of balance, the better you can comprehend God's universal language of light in which God talks to you. Likewise, the more you dynamically know that principle is manifested in everything you do, the less problems you will have to overcome. For that reason, I shall talk to you at length concerning the principle and dramatize my teaching by human example as to the application of that law to every phase of your life, from business to matrimony, from frustration to glorification, or from health to friendship. God has given you something to guide your life actions which you probably never have given thought to. He has given you what is known as an equator when applied to Earth or the Sun. As applied to you, it is a plane which divides your body into two equals and opposite halves, and each opposite half symmetrically balances the other half, but in reverse. It is as though your body were vertically cut in half from head to feet, and an invisible mirror placed there, for each half to reflect the other half in reverse. If you do not thoroughly grasp my meaning and look in a mirror, the equator which divides you is the still magnetic light which divides all things, but which in itself cannot be divided. Perhaps you will meditate upon this subject with me and ask of yourself what significance the equator of your body has upon your health, happiness, success, or other incidents of your life. There must be some vast significance to this one fact because every creating unit of organic and inorganic matter is similarly divided. Every insect, plant, corpuscular animal, vegetable or mineral matter, and every star, sun, or planet in the universe. The vast significance of the equator of all creating things lies in the fact that the equators are the dividing planes of the universal equilibrium. They therefore represent the undivided, the unchanging spiritual light from which the physical bodies of all things are extended. The zero, which is the center of gravity of all bodies, centers the equator of all material bodies. The light of your consciousness is on that portion of your equator of you which centers the two thought extensions of your brain. The real immortal you, the invisible you, controls the visible body of you from the equator of your body. Everything you are in thought extends two ways from your consciousness, which is located upon your equator. Your senses vibrate from that equator when your equator is out of balance with the universal equilibrium, and ceases to vibrate when it is in balance with it. In the following chapters, I will tell you much about the relation of your own particular equator, which divides and controls your mental and physical lives, in order that you may see how God is working with you in the unfolding of your destiny every moment of your life. Never forget that what you are doing in the divided visible universe is a manifestation of what you are thinking in the undivided invisible universe. Conclusion: you will have a different viewpoint of life when you thoroughly comprehend how helpless you are without knowing God as one, and how powerful you are when you know Him in you. There is much to be said and explained, but for this lesson I will close by illustrating for you that equator of the divine trinity which we call life and death. See figure 22. Life and death are equal opposites. They are sexed mates, as all pairs of opposites are sexed mates. They interchange from the moment of birth, and that interchange is sex interchange. The purpose of that interchange is to seek balance with each other, which is the sole purpose of all sex interchange between all pairs of opposites. When life and death find balance, they lose it. As all pairs of opposites perpetually lose the balance, they perpetually seek the moment they find it. Life and death are born in the same cradle, but the cradle is a cycle, like the swinging of a pendulum, with an equator between the two from which life extends one way and the death the other way. Each inward breath you take is a rebirth toward life. Each outward breath is a rebirth toward death. As life and death continually interchange, they approach each other until they meet at the halfway point, the equator of your life cycle. From there on, life is dying so that death may live, and death is living so that life may die. There is no death in God's universe. There is not but perpetual rebirth into an endless repetition of rebirth. Every opposite gives birth to its own opposite simultaneously and becomes its opposite sequentially. You will remember God's words as given in his message of the divine Iliad. Know thou then that I alone live. I do not die, but out of me comes both seeming life and death. Life is but the inward flow of my thinking, divided, pulsing, and death is its outward flow. Know thou also that the division of my thinking are but equal halves of one. For I again say that I am one, that all things which come from me are one, divided to appear as two. End of lesson. Lesson 15. Man must know man. There are many things which are not yet known about your mind, your thinking, and your body, which you should know. You have to live in a creative world as a co-creator of it, and the more you know of how you create bodies with your thinking as nature produces them, and the more you know about the principle which govern the creation of bodies, the more you can control, not only your own body, but your destiny. In the last lesson I told you of the equator which divides your physical body. Now I shall tell you of the equator which divides your thought bodies in order that you may comprehend the principles which makes you an intensive thinker, and also how your intensive thinking energizes your body through the two equators which govern your mental and physical unfolding. Everyone wishes to be a powerful thinker of great imagination and have a powerful, well-balanced, healthy body which grows stronger and more vital into his 70s instead of beginning to weaken in his 40s. I wish to remind you that what I am telling you in the next few lessons I have myself demonstrated, as I was commanded to do so in my instruction. The most vital year of my physical life was my 72nd year. I grew more powerful of body until that year. My mental power is strongly on the increase and ever will be. Senility shall never touch me, and it should never touch any man who knows of his exact relation to his source, both spiritually and physically. If you really want to know the priceless things I have been prepared to tell to you, you should be willing to make as great an effort to comprehend it as you did when studying your multiplication tables, for the greatest depths of science are as simple in principle as that. Those who might imagine the science approaches beyond their comprehension can be likened to those who desire to be composers of symphonies, who are not willing to study the octaves, harmonies, and rhythms upon which compositions in music depend. Symphonies can never be written from abstract desire, for music is built upon structure. Everything in nature is built upon the same rhythmic, balanced octave structure, so when you understand the principle as applied to one thing, you understand it for all things. Where is your source of energy? Another step in the unfolding of God's plan is to tell you how that mysterious thing called energy becomes yours to use, where it comes from, and what it is. That is why I must talk to you for quite a while about equators which seemingly divide God's one unconditioned light into pairs of oppositely conditioned light. I use the word seemingly, for the divided light seems to be two, the incandescent light of suns and the cold dark light of space. These lights are not two, hence they are not divided, but only seem to be, because they are either contracting or expanding according to their direction of motion to express motherhood or fatherhood. Every idea of mind is divided into its two oppositely conditioned expressions. Each seem to be two, but are equal halves of the same thing. Witness, for example, the male and female pairs of opposite of the man idea. The idea is one, but its manifestation is two, always two. First, the invisible idea, then the visible manifestation of that idea expressed in bodies of formed matter. Idea is always expressed by the outward giving from a point of stillness in the direction of motherhood, followed by the inward re-giving in the direction of fatherhood toward that same point. The outward giving is the unfolding of idea from the womb of suns and earth, and the inward re-giving is the refolding of idea into form. The outward giving in every radial direction from one zero point and its inevitable re-giving to the same point is the basis of the radial three-dimensional universe of hot spheres of concentrated light surrounded by cold cubes of decentrated light. In other words, desire of the Creator to give outward from every point in his universal equilibrium acts like an outward explosion taking place everywhere. The reaction to the outward explosion is an inward explosion which re-gives that which was given. Desire to give and re-give, to manifest love, is the basis of the universal heartbeat, which seemingly divides the one into its two opposite expressions. The equators which separate the physical and mental divisions of the universal equilibrium are what I want to talk to you about in their relation to energy. I have been saving this up for you until you had a better understanding of the divided and undivided universe which have been referred to by mystics for ages, but have never been explained by any of them. If you read that glorious epic of the unknown, deeply illumined mystic of several thousand years ago, called the Bhagavad Gita, you will find many references to it all through the book. He knew exactly what it meant, but he could not tell it. Science has completely ignored the inspired revelation of these early mystics as illogical and impossible. If science has ever been given evidence that it even took note of it, the reaction to it was that it was illogical to consider that the undivided and indivisible could be divided. That is good reasoning, for the undivided cannot be divided. The magnetic light of the God mind is an equilibrium, and naturally could not be divided, but it can seem to be. And that seeming is the illusion that this physical universe of motion is which I am gradually unfolding to you. Later on I will explain to you the office and purpose of the light mirrors and lenses God makes use of it to build his illusions of motion in wave fields which seem to divide his one light into the extension of the divine Trinity. But for the present imagine a mirror placed in a room which not only made two where there was one, but made each one the reverse of the other. Now I want to give you something to think about and deeply. If God is omnipotent, which means all power, or energy of the material universe, how can there be any power or energy in bodies of matter? If God created the universe of matter, it necessarily follows that the energy which created it is in the Creator, and not in his creation. Just as the energy which is in your creation is in you, and not in the books you write nor in the buildings you build. An idea for deep thought. Science says that heat is energy. I want you to think this over to see how impossible and how illogical this conclusion is. Yet it is the very cornerstone of science from which the first law of thermodynamics arose, and from that first law came the second law of thermodynamics, from which the expanding universe theory sprang. Neither of these laws have any validity whatsoever, even though they are the very foundation of science. Heat is the sex mate of cold. Heat cannot express energy through motion unless it is surrounded by cold. Heat is as dead as a dead storage battery unless and until it has its cold mate to interchange with. When you breathe in, you create heat. When you breathe out, you create cold. You provide the energy to create these conditions. Exactly the same thing can be claimed for cold cannot express energy unless and until it is near heat. Yet science does not claim that cold is energy. Both cold and heat are mutually created conditions arising from the division of the universal equilibrium. Just as they mutually create each other, so likewise they mutually void each other by interchange at their equators. What I want you to weigh with your sense of logic is this. You can create heat by your own energy, your own desire to create. If you create heat through energy extended to you from God, you can logically say that your creation created itself. Science explains its claim by explaining that the universe was created eons ago by some unexplainable cataclysm which formed a tremendous ball of fire, which is now expanding to form into smaller balls of fire. All of these are supposedly expanding into the cold of space. Such a happening is impossible, for there still remains the fact that the ball of fire had to be created by energy. Where did the energy come from to create itself? This is the unanswered question. If there is a God creator, then God created the universe from an energy of omnipotence which is in him and not in his creation. All the heat of all the universe is the effect produced by God's concentrative thinking, and cold is its decentrated mate. Science can produce heat only by simultaneously producing cold. That principle is reversed by refrigeration to produce cold. You cannot produce cold on one side of the equator of the two without producing heat on the other side of it. They are the father and mother principle of the divided universe. A divided equilibrium must produce equal and opposite pairs simultaneously. Then each one must become the other sequentially. Heat expresses energy by expanding, but cold expresses an equal energy by contracting. The heat of suns radiates out into space as cold. It has become its own opposite, as all effects of motion in nature do. Then the cold of space generates the heat that is in the sun. Cold has also become its own opposite by reversing its outward radial direction to an inward radial direction. That is all the difference there is in between contraction and expansion. This effect is like every other effect in nature. Sexed pairs interchange their conditions to find balance, but find it only to lose it. The heartbeat of the universe never stops. For that reason, the interchange between opposite mates is eternally repetitive. Nothing in nature ever stops. It is always unfolding, always becoming. You are one unit of creation, a universal unit of it which cannot be separated from the whole. Therefore, you can never cease to be. You are forever unfolding, forever becoming. You are the energy of you. Moreover, you are the energy which created the entire universe. Do take this idea into your deep meditation and feel the exaltation of it. Feel the mighty power of it. Heat and cold are sex mates. I want you to think more intensively upon this subject of energy expression and apply it now to what affects you in your every thought and action. In knowledge of it lies the secret of your own personal power. Tremendous energy is expressed in the crushing force of ice caps and glaciers, as well as flaming volcanoes or steam. But the expression of energy is not energy. Cold Arctic and Antarctic currents move toward the equator to find balance by sex interchange with warm currents, and warm currents equally desire that interchange and flow toward the poles to find it. The energy expressed by cold currents exactly equals the energy expressed by the warm currents. Why say that heat is energy when cold expresses equal energy? Each are powerless without the other. Moreover, each became what it was because of the other. Heat is radiation in reverse. Cold is generation in reverse. If each are thus powerless, why give one power which it does not possess? Heat radiates. Its expansion lowers its potential, but cold gravitates, and its contraction equally raises its potential. The second law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot run uphill, which means that it cannot increase its potential, but can only decrease it. Gravitation increases potential equally with its decrease by radiation. Gravitation and radiation are equal opposites. Gravitation is centripetal. It winds matter up into tightly compact solids. Radiation is centrifugal. It unwinds solids into liquids, gases, and ethers of space. Gravitation and radiation are father and mother which born the divided universe into formed bodies of ideas and disintegrates those bodies in sequential lives and death forever. Gravitation charges bodies with positive electricity. Radiation discharges body with negative electricity. Solids are formed by positive charge and space is formed by negative discharge. There is no such effect in nature as negative charge. The outward direction of radiation and the inward direction of gravitation is the motivating mechanism which keeps the universal heartbeat forever pumping as your heartbeat pumps while geared to it. This entire divided universe of motion is one huge cosmic electric compression expansion pump, and gravitation and radiation is its two-way moving piston. The piston is one, but it moves two ways to express its oneness. The energy which motivates the universal pump is neither heat, cold, compression, expansion, gravitation, or radiation, for these are all effects of energy, but they are not energy. Nature demands that every effect of motion anywhere must return to the condition from which it started, and each condition must return through its equator to become its opposite, for all effects of motion are expressed in cycles. The more you comprehend this fact, the more you will understand the principle of reincarnation when we reach that stage in these lessons. We will consider the two conditions of water as an example of how they interchange to become their own opposites through sex interchange. When the sun shines on the ocean, it evaporates. Heat expands it from the positive condition, which belongs to gravity, to the negative condition, which belongs to radiation. As water vapor, it can no longer remain on earth. It must rise. When it has found a balanced condition, it floats. It becomes a cloud floating in the unchanging direction of equal pressure. A cold wind suddenly condenses it. It contracts again into smaller volume and once more seeks the positive direction of gravity. Once more it has become its own opposite, which borned it as it falls readily toward the center of the earth. You can see plainly that heat cannot be energy unless cold is, for each one of the two express equal energy in opposite directions. Likewise, you could not say that life is energy, for life borns death, and death expresses as much energy in borning life from earth as life expresses in giving death to earth. Let us summarize this cyclic effect to demonstrate the fact that every effect of motion which happens on one side of the equator must journey to the opposite side of that equator as its own opposite. It must then reverse its condition and return to the other side of the equator forever. Nothing ever blots that necessity for motion out. There are no exceptions to it. Earth or suns disappear, but division into opposite conditions repeat themselves forever, each of which takes up its residence on opposite sides of mutual equator for a period of time, then changes over to the other side. Here is one cycle which demonstrates the law. Heat radiates, radiation expands, expansion cools, cold generates, generation contracts, contraction heats, and heat again radiates. This cycle demonstrates the very obvious fact of nature that each opposite of every pair in nature is born out of its opposite simultaneously and sequentially becomes that other opposite from which it is born. No matter how many sets of words you may use in respect to other pairs of opposites, the law is the same for every pair of opposite halves of ideas in the universe. Motion itself is presumed to be energy. Motion expresses energy, but again we say the expression of energy is not energy. Just as a photograph of a man is not the man, the poem is not the poet, nor the play the playwright. Motion takes place only for the purpose of finding balance for a condition which is out of balance with its equilibrium. There is no energy in matter or motion. Likewise, there is no life or light or truth or law in matter or motion. Life is extended from the stillness of undivided conscious mind to manifest life by dividing it into life and death. But the expression of life has thus manifested is not life, it but symbolizes life. Likewise, energy is extended from the stillness of the undivided light of mind through the thinking of mind. Thinking is electric and is expressed by motion, so thinking is not energy, for thinking is motion. Where then is the universal energy? It is not in motion at all, but in the stillness from which motion springs. And that stillness is in the magnetic light of universal consciousness. Within the universal conscious mind is desire for expressing the one whole idea, which is creation. Without the desire of mind, there would be no electric thought universe of divided sex-conditioned pairs. Likewise, your desire of mind is your energy to produce thought bodies in divided sex-conditioned pairs. When you produce a child in your own image, it is through the desire of you and your mate to interchange through each other to find balance in your mutual equator. The heat of suns, likewise, will not produce its planetary children without interchange with its cold mate on the other side of their mutual equator. Planets are born through interchange between hot suns and cold space. Likewise, all the heat of all the universe will not produce your child, nor your poem, symphony, house, book, or any other creation of your desire. Why, then, call heat energy? Desire of mind is the universal motivating force. Desire of mind and the will of mind are one. Without the desire to move, you cannot move. If you so much as desire to lift your finger, you cannot do so until you will it to move. Try it. See if it will move of itself without being told to do so by the desire of your will. When you then do move it, you have immediately established an equator for that action and have borrowed the power to move it from the other side of that equator, by assuming an obligation to balance your borrowing by an equal exchange. No action can take place in nature without dividing the universal equilibrium by an equator to balance the action simultaneously with an equal reaction, then exchanging them, each for the other, sequentially. God will not allow you to unbalance his universe even to the weight of an electron. On the other hand, he will help you move the whole universe for your own benefit if you but obey his law of balanced interchange. There is no limit to what you may do with his help, but the slightest action taken against him hurts you in the measure of your breach of the law of balance. I again quote Law's divine message in reference to the teaching in this lesson. The heavens and the earth of my curved universe are father, mother of my universe, each of each and each to the other one. Neither one can be save the other also be. Nor can one leave the other, saying, Sit thou here while I journey to the far reaches. Nor can there be aught upon the earth without the fathering skies, nor in the skies without the motherhood of earth. Neither man, nor birds, nor reptile, nor fish, nor beast of wild jungle. Neither tree, nor flower, nor shrilly singing insect, neither tempest, wild tornado, nor gentle breeze of calm ocean, nor cloud, nor mist, no dewdrop for flower petal. Not one of these things can be born of earth alone, unfathered by the heaven, nor can heaven alone born them without the motherhood of earth. Thus is my imagined electric universe born, dissolved and reborn, concentrated, decentrated, and reconcentrated, integrated, disintegrated, and reintegrated forever and ever in my imagined universe of imagined time and space. And behold, each of my pairs of opposite expressions of me are reborn through me as the other one. Again I say, there is naught but a rebirth in me, there is no death. Again I say, I the light am one, but my thinking is electric, and thought is two in every creating thing, two halves of one which never can be one. Always must they be two to go opposed ways from me and back again to me, for reborning from the one another after finding rest in me. Pairs of opposites are simultaneously born from each other. In its electrically divided universe of polarized light, the positive condition which compresses light into incandescent sun is simultaneously counterbalanced by the negative condition which equally expands light into evacuated black holes in space, which are equal to the sun's pressure but in reverse. The sun is manifesting the male idea by its preponderance of inward pulling toward its center over its outward thrusting. The empty hole on the other side of its spatial equator, which is its sexed mate, is manifesting the female idea by its preponderant desire to thrust outward from its center. The mutual giving of each born each from the other simultaneously. Balanced interchange is sequentially repeated. Explaining how all bodies are both positive and negative. All masses of matter in the universe are doubly charged. The male is also female, and the female also male. But one condition dominates each. When bodies breathe inward, they express fatherhood by generating heat. When they breathe outward, they radiate heat and thus express motherhood. The in-breathing charges the body positively, and the out-breathing discharges the body. This electric action and reaction expressed in sequence synchronizes with the universal heartbeat, which divides the universal equilibrium into life-death cycles of appearance and disappearance. Explaining how the father-mother extends to father and mother. All of the stars and nebula of the heavens plainly manifest the simultaneous giving and regiving of love as the one desire of the father-mother of creation. In this nebula, the outward thrust of radiation is the giving principle of motherhood. The motherhood principle of giving is seen in the two white luminous arms which extend centrifugally outward from the equator of suns. The inward pull of the gravitation is the regiving principle of fatherhood. The fatherhood principle of regiving is seen in the two black arms which reach inward centripetally to the poles of the sun. This simultaneous interchange between the two opposite pressures winds light up spirally from space and hot suns, and sequentially unwinds the hot suns into cold space. The black arms reaching inward from cold space generate matter into appearance, while the white arms reaching outward from hot suns degenerate matter into disappearance. Explaining simultaneous giving and regiving. Desire to manifest the love principle of nature is manifested by the seeming division of the idea of love into its many pairs of opposite expressions. The electric action of giving extends radially outward from a center of rest in the universal light of mind. The reaction of re-giving is simultaneously expressed by the outward giving of motherhood meeting with the inward pressure of re-giving of fatherhood, which are returning in the opposite radial direction. The resistance to this two-way flow of opposed pressures winds all form into spheres spirally, and likewise unwinds them. End of lesson. Lesson number 16. Answered students' questions who want to know what to do about it. Lesson number 12 began with these words from the Divine Iliad. All questions are answerable in light. Thou art light, thou canst answer them. I repeat these words because you will gradually know their import as the lesson progresses. You do not yet know their import, and one reason for my repetition is to take advantage of your growing understanding of your sonship with God, which the last lessons have unfolded, and add one more reinforcing thought. For this reason I will repeat the paragraph in other words as follows. All questions are answerable by you. You have all knowledge within the light of yourself. When you know this sufficiently to thoroughly believe it, you will become as a rock upon which you yourself will lean. This is a more direct way of making you feel that God's words were meant for you alone. What I want you to do is to form the habit of thinking inwardly toward your center of consciousness instead of outwardly through your senses as mankind has been doing in the past. That is what I mean by saying you must know what to do with it, for the answer to all your problems lies within yourself. Anything which is wrong with you is due to an unbalance somewhere in your interchange between the two opposite conditions within which everyone must work. You alone can find that unbalance which is the cause of your problem. Your problem is an effect which you have produced. The core you work knowingly with God by thinking inwardly towards your God self, the more you will keep every decision in balance. As your actions always follow your decisions, they also will continually manifest the principle of the Divine Trinity. That is what I mean by knowing what to do with it, for when you go outside of yourself and either thinking outwardly or asking of others, you are admitting that you do not know what to do with it, and will never know what to do with it so long as you continue to deny God in you. That is why I have been telling you to never seek the solution to any personal, social, or business problem outside of yourself by asking advice from anyone, or even telling anybody. The moment you do that, you complex your problems mightily. No one can take over your problems as their own. No one even cares to listen to them. There is something in human nature that makes one shun listening to other people's problems, and that is the way it should be. Try to recall when you yourself have done this, when someone which seemed unpleasant or unfortunate, even to illnesses or operations, tempted you to ask advice from anyone in such a manner which inferred leaning upon them or casting your burdens on them. If you will analyze your action, you will probably find that your motive was deeply colored with a desire for sympathy with yourself, as well as suggesting a desire to another that you needed to have him decide upon actions which should be your decisions arrived at by you in communion with God. To seek sympathy for yourself or sympathies with yourself is founded upon self-pity for a situation which you are thereby making a reality of, instead of conquering it yourself by your own decision and glorifying it in your own God-given omniscience. Such passings of your great creatorship of yourself to another self is the greatest possible factor in weakening rather than strengthening yourself. A leader of men does not ask to be led. When you ask to be led, you are acknowledging your weakness. A genius creator in the arts goes to God for his inspiration. An unwise one who asks another might just as well stab his creation to its heart. Do not misunderstand me by thinking I am advising against consulting with another. Let me clarify my meaning in this respect. If something is wrong with your car, you are aware of it and you decide to have it fixed. That is your decision. You are not a mechanic. You have not been informed regarding such techniques, and you have not acquired the skills nor equipment needed to fix it. Information, skills, and techniques are not knowledge. You have what is required to fix your car, the knowing of its condition, which makes you decide what to do about it. And that is your decision, not some friends or neighbors. Likewise, you must consult your doctor or tailors when you need their information, skills, or techniques to mend your broken bones or to make a suit of clothes. Such consultations all must have, for not anyone has all skills, all information, and all techniques. The idea which I am accentuating is that you should never be a reflection in the mirror of another. You should extend yourself to all other men as all other men extend themselves to you. That which you decide to take on of another man's extension is your decision, not theirs. You can take on jazz or Beethoven as you desire, or you can insulate yourself against them. But if you are a reflection in the mirror instead of being the mirror which reflects, or a sponge which absorbs instead of a rock with which withstands all things alike, you are denying your inheritance from our Father and Mother, and becoming that which is being created instead of being a co-creator with your Father and Mother of our mutually creating universe. Again, I say that the answer to all problems and questions concerning any effect whatsoever lies in your knowing of the principle of balance and its extension into the Divine Trinity. During these 48 lessons, this principle of balance will be extended and exemplified. I have hardly touched the subject as yet. Knowledge of the relation to mental balance in the extensions of your thinking, and to your physical balance in relation to the effects caused in your own body and in the thought bodies, which you are forever creating, will give you a power you have never yet dreamt of having. In the next lesson, I will give you knowledge of the balanced relation of your body to the earth, from which it is extended, which will amaze you, and should affect all world thinking and medical practice for its greater benefits. Gradually you will take within yourself this new knowing to replace old habits of relying upon your senses of observation, which are so deceptive and lead you into such a strange path. Before I leave this subject to answer the questions, I want to call your attention to something which happens to cosmic thinkers, meaning those who think from their consciousness rather than sense from their brains, which may confuse you if you do not understand it. The following question prompted me to explain it now, for many really inspired thinkers are very much confused by it, misinterpret it to their injury rather than to their glorification. Question. Ever since studying the Divine Iliad and your other writings, I have had strange mental happenings such as I had never known before. Suddenly something I never knew before comes like a flash, and when I am compelled to write it down, I am surprised, for I never knew such things before. I write them down with a wonderful feeling which must be the ecstasy you speak of. I am wondering if some voice is trying to speak through me. Please explain it. Is that what is meant by being occult? My writings are not automatic, for I know what I am writing. Answer. No, there is nothing occult about it, nor is there any other voice than your own, which is God's trying to speak through you. What is happening is that you are beginning to think from the divinity of yourself, which is from your consciousness. Knowledge comes to you in timeless flashes when you think inwardly toward the light of consciousness rather than outwardly toward the senses. Inspiration means that way, and great inspiration is always accompanied by the ecstasy of the God nature. The geniuses in all of the arts know that ecstasy and seek it constantly in order to interpret God's rhythm as they resound from the silence of our cosmic heartbeat. What you are doing by your meditation over God's Word in the Divine Iliad is unfolding your own genius. All geniuses are cosmic thinkers. As this new thinking increases in its intensity, you will find that quality which is known as intuition increasing in its intensity. Intuition is a cosmic quality which is unfolding in the human race. It is one way in which God speaks to man. It is a timeless and wordless communication of the universal mind to the universal mind in the unfolding of creation. You are a part of the unfolding of creation. Your destiny is an integral part of that unfolding. Intuition is mind unfolding desire of mind. Just as inspiration is a mind's awareness of an idea, so is intuition a mind's awareness of one's plan of action concerning the destiny of that idea. How often I have felt intuition telling me what to do or what not to do. It is as though God holds up his hand and said, "Do not do that, my son." Do not be surprised, therefore, when your inner thinking toward the light causes the light to respond to your desire to be guided by the light of inner knowing. Question. When we decentrate, should we visualize our desire mentally, or should we visualize this before or after decentrating? Answer. First charge your whole being with your desire. Concentrate upon it as intensely as you can, then relax and forget it. The very reaction to concentrated desire is decentration. You may have hardly time to realize that you have decentrated. I've had many of my conceptions unfold to me from the stillness of my consciousness almost as soon as I expressed a desire. In a timeless flash, the concept stood before me in a mind-imagined thought body to which I afterward gave a material body over a period of years. Question: why does it seem so extremely difficult to decentrate in the early morning before rising, which is not the case later in the day? Answer: I am afraid you have confused the activity of your senses with the thinking which extends from your consciousness. In the early mornings before rising, one's brain is sluggish and sleepy, not yet electrically active. Consciousness is stilled with lack of desire for creative expression. Until you have extended your desire from your consciousness, it is at rest, for it is not your consciousness which decentrates, but your thinking. I have another question which I will answer next, in which you will get a greater understanding as to what to do about it. Question: I still am not clear as to decentration. If decentration is the opposite of concentration, I cannot see how it could be the zero stillness. For if concentration is the positive sex-mate of decentration, the latter must belong to electricity and not to the magnetic light of zero stillness. Please explain. Answer: yes, decentration does belong to electricity, but it is the unwinding of that which has been wound up to the concentrate. If you just unwind enough to find balance in zero, you will have decentrated to zero from a concentrative condition. But if you continue to decentrate, you will still be active mentally, for its opposite sex-mate will demand that you interchange to find balance. A continuity of that is what thinking is. But if you stop that interchange when both are balanced, you will find the rest in the zero of the light of the universal equilibrium, from which you can gain the knowledge and impetus for another start in thinking. Have you not often heard a man say, when deeply confused, "Hold on for a minute and let me get my equilibrium"? That means that he is so far out of balance or confusion of ideas that he wishes a fresh start from zero. Another way I can exemplify this idea is to imagine two children playing seesaw. That dual interchange exemplifies the thinking process. When they are sitting on the ends of their seesaw before starting to move, they are in the sexless condition of undivided balance. They are in the condition you are in if you stop concentrating or decentrating. The moment they move, they have divided their one balanced condition into two unbalanced conditions of concentration and decentration, which need to interchange to restore balance. When one child is up high and the other down low, they are in an uncomfortable opposed position which they cannot long sustain. That is the sex-divided condition which arouses all the passion of all the earth-creating things and the desire of all things to find balance and rest from such uncomfortable positions of separation of one half of itself from the other half. That zero of rest is in the middle of their board. That is the point of rest from which they are divided to express idea in motion. When the children reach that level, they are momentarily in equilibrium, but they instantly lose it again. If they stop there, it would be like your ceasing to think. Even though they do stop, they are still extended from their centering source. They are still divided, though motionless. If they both drew together in the center, they would be united with their source, and could not move until they again desired to become divided. To apply that to thinking and cosmic consciousness, first stop thinking. Then withdraw your electrical extension into your centering consciousness. That causes a partial or complete forgetfulness of body according to the intensity of your ability to sever the electric extensions when divide you from your consciousness. The genius partially severs body sensations from spiritual consciousness. The fully illumined cosmic conscious mystic completely severs sensation from consciousness. The more you meditate within the zero of your own consciousness, the more you will become enabled to sever sensation from consciousness. On the other hand, you can overdo this by thus neglecting to intensify your thinking. That is the mistake many of the Buddhists make. While trying to seek nirvana in cosmic consciousness, they lose it by depolarizing their power of thought, which also depolarizes their body. Cessation of purposefulness depolarizes both body and mind, for thinking is polarization of mind, and action is polarization of body. But this is another story which will come to you later, on which I have sufficiently laid the foundation for its comprehension. Question: if during either concentration or decentration one feels an extreme ecstatic state through the entire body, Is this actually the ecstatic state mentioned in your lessons, or is it a merely emotion? Answer. Cosmic ecstasy is a mind condition, not a body one. It is the mind nature of God and God in you. You cannot feel it through your entire body, as you say. In fact, your body cannot feel it at all. You mistake the exhilaration and joyfulness of the harmonious, rhythmic vibrations of vitality, good health, and peace of mind coming from the purely mental state which shuts out bodily vibrations. When I am skating or climbing mountains, I feel that bodily exhilaration which you referred to. But when I am meditating or walking quietly in the forest, where I continually step in and out of my body, there is a constant alteration of that vital bodily feeling of intense joyousness, which just as suddenly disappears and gives place to the stillness of mental ecstasy. A good example to illustrate my meaning is in the sound vibrations of the body, which a harp string creates to manifest the idea which lies within its silence. Let us say that the idea is D in the octave. The idea of D is in the silent stillness of the motionless string. When you pluck the string, you give that idea a body, a sound body of wave vibration. Those vibrations are felt by the senses of other bodies, but when the body disappears into the silence from which it sprang, the sound still exists as idea in the silent vibrationless string. You can no longer hear or see its body, but you can know it, and you can hear it in your thoughts as a thought body, not yet given a material body. Question. Will you tell me if using the two hands in massage for healing will cause avoidance, or should only one hand at a time be used? Please explain. Answer. No, it will not. Working with both hands multiplies your power immeasurably over working with one hand. The only way you should void your power is in not working with either hand, for your power is in your decision, not in the action. You extend your power by the action of manifesting your knowing through action. Your decision comes from your knowledge. That concept which you have arrived at mentally is the reality which you extend to your patient, but the reality will do him no good unless you do extend it through action, not through the inaction of wishful thinking. It is through polarity of body that we manifest our action by extending our balanced polarity to others whose polarity is unbalanced. Balanced interchange balances unbalanced polarity. By referring to Figure 20 on page 232, you will see how the human body is vertically polarized by an equator, which divides it into positive and negative half. One lobe of your brain is on one half. How much thinking could you do with one lobe? Likewise, one arm is on one half. How much can you do when one arm cannot interchange with the other? Think of the rhythmic action of interchange and the swinging of your arms when you walk. If you tie one arm when you walk, you would vastly divide the benefit to your body by lessening your ability to balance it. By using one arm for your massage, you are virtually binding the other. This makes it more difficult for you to restore balance to your patient by extending yours to him. Balanced interchange is helpful, but rhythmic balanced interchange is infinitely more helpful. Rhythmic expression will soothe and induce sleep, which is evidence of a restoration of balance, while unrhythmic movement would have the opposite effect. Question. What do you mean by the two lights of God's thinking? Answer. One of the two lights is the positive light of concentrative thinking. That light compresses light waves into solid forms. It is the red half of the octave spectrum which leads to white-hot incandescence. It is the light of a universal fatherhood. The other of the two is the negative light of decentrative thinking. That light expands light waves into formless gases. It is the blue half of the octave spectrum which leads to the blackness of the cold space. It is the light of universal motherhood. These are the two lights of the senses which you can see and feel and hear in sound waves when the two lights interchange. When they are balanced and cease interchanging, you can no longer sense them, for you are a vibratory body which can sense vibratory bodies only. You cannot sense the equilibrium which follows the voidance, which results from cessation of motion. Question. I have a son who worries me very much. I fear he will be a failure in life, for he refused to go back to college the second year and will not go into my business with me as I had hoped he would. I just cannot keep him in the office 10 minutes. He seems to either dislike business or is very stupid about it. He is forever wasting his time hanging around airfields and making drawings of planes. He knows every make of plane and every part of a plane, besides knowing all of its personnel. Please tell me what I can do about it. Answer. If you are a wise father, you will give him all the encouragement in the world and allowing him freedom to live his own life as he chooses, instead of demanding that he live it as you choose. What you tell me leads me to believe that he is tremendously interested in flight engineering and nothing else. A man can achieve greatness only in the thing he is most interested in. He would either make a failure of your business if you obliged him to inherit it, or make his life a failure even though he succeeded in building it to a high attitude. I know a man who made $50 million because he was unavoidably drawn into his father's growing business, yet he was unhappy because his life was one long frustration. He had other desires and loathed business, yet forced himself to become master of it. He told me he would greatly give his entire fortune up if he could have lived as he chose, even though that meant living in an attic room. The greatest men I've ever known revolted at the thought of going to college, and many of them were considered to be failures because of their low marks. Thomas Edison was one of them. I knew a man who tried to force his son to follow the sea and navigate great ships as he did. The son threw himself into the sea. I know another one who insisted that his son become a dentist. The son ran away. I know of many such cases. I trust you will let your boy have the opportunity of becoming a mastermind in a profession of his own choosing. Question. I find it difficult to keep up a sustained state of ecstasy. Why is this? Answer. So long as you are really inspired and working knowingly with God, that state of ecstasy will last for hours or even days if the measure of your inspiration is great enough to demand a long time and fulfilling. A musician who is writing a long symphony or a sculptor working on some inspired, time-consuming conception can remain much longer in that state because of his work than one who is not creating something. Very often, some very little thing, such as a call to the telephone, will end the possibility of continuing that ecstasy for a long time. In such cases, it is well to take up other little human occupations for a while, and before you realize it, the ecstasy will return. It may be that a return to the work itself will quickly lift you up into the high heavens again by the very contemplation of it. Always remember that the human you will constantly assert itself, for you are obliged to attend to the many calls of your body and your senses, which cannot all be automatically performed. The more you make it a habit of your mind, however, and also make it a way of thinking, the more easily you slip in and out of it without even thinking or effect. When you have arrived at that stage where you are continually slipping in and out of it with no thought or effort whatsoever, the more you will be enabled to sustain it when it is with you. Conclusion. Many of the questions we are receiving are very similar. When this happens, I select one which is typical and answer that one to cover all. Also, many questions are coming which are far ahead of where we are now. So if you have asked such a question, do not be disappointed if it's not answered until we get to where it is appropriate. It pleases us very much when we receive letters telling us to ignore questions asked because the writers have found the answer within themselves. That is just what these lessons are striving to accomplish, for when you actually accept the fact that all knowledge exists universally, which means within you, you will not only know what to do about any problem which confronts you, but you will find an indescribable happiness in your moment-to-moment communion with God as you habitually turn to Him by thinking within your consciousness. When you thus find the kingdom of heaven, you will also find that all things else shall be added unto you. Beloved friends, addressing you all thus, I am overwhelmed with such a deep, deep gratitude that it is hard to express in words all the love I know for you. Some of your hands we have clasped and held, and with others we have become insolubly bound through the invisible cosmic love that binds all who know and love God as themselves. But there will never be greater treasures for us in God's whole universe than the words in your letters that come daily. Never have such letters inspired us to those that were coming, telling of the daily unfolding awareness and understanding of God's divine laws and principles as set forth in the home study course. I ask you now if you'll forgive me if I cannot personally answer all your letters immediately, for working with Doctor on the lessons in addition to the already very heavy schedule makes it physically impossible to write all the letters I so long dear to. But please know that you are ever in my heart, and your dear love, which you extend to us both as one, is the spiritual food that sustains us through our many long hours of work in delivering God's greatest message. It is your very own letters that are proving this to us, for they are living proof of your growing understanding. And when you write how your friends, observing the glorious changes in your outward expression and way of life, want to know more about what you are studying, we know it is the true beginning of cosmic man and peace on earth. If space would permit, I would fill several pages this month with whole letters from you who are God's precious workers. Instead, I must contend to quote some brief passages, which I know will make you happy as they have made us. Just multiply all you read by 100 or more, and you will get some small idea of the richness of love that flows out for God's message and comes back to you all in every word of the lessons each month. MF writes, "These thanks come from my heart for such a clear scientific teaching. All my lifetime I have searched for the key, and now I've found it. Words are incapable of expressing the gratitude I feel." A wonderful couple who were here last summer and are now studying the home study course together and spreading God's message to others writes, "We have read and heard in lectures nothing comparable to it in spiritual value. Each lesson is filled with wisdom and carries a promise of perfect unfoldment. The third group of lessons has arrived and we are deep in the content. Both Dee and I feel your nearness as we read. It is like sitting in your rose garden and listening to you talking to us about things we must know to help spread the message. All who are taking home study course that I am in contact with are very enthusiastic and state that they are experiencing more peace of mind and harmony in their affairs than they have ever had before. Isn't that wonderful?" And yet another lovely couple writes, "Through your intimate home study course, we can truly say we are working with and in the light. You have given such wonderful new material that no one who studies the course need ever seek outside aid. We have been amazed at what this new knowledge has done for us. Our daily desires are so simultaneously fulfilled that we are filled with ecstasy. From the sense world standpoint, we count those lessons among our most valuable possessions, and yet we know that having found the light, these truths will be with us always. We relish the thought of always having you dear ones in the universe. May this short letter assure you that through the printed lessons, you are teaching men how to find the light. We marvel at the simplicity of the scientific facts you have been able to give to us and know that, from the results already obtained, your writings will lead anyone to the light who seeks it according to the instructions contained herein. We are very busy people, but want you to know that we are urging everyone who is sincerely seeking the truth to take this course, and look forward to the day when we may give our full time to strengthening our activities." The last sentence of this letter and the following paragraph from another advanced and precious student brings to the foreground a great plan Doctor and I are unfolding in our consciousness and about which we will tell you very soon. We know it is destined to bring forth momentous things for you who are the seed group for bringing the message to mankind and heralding in the cosmic age. In next month or so we will tell you more of this plan. In the meantime, we know you will continue to study every moment you can in preparation for the great work ahead. The future peace of the world will depend on man's knowledge of God and living of his laws. He who knows that every experience is good are fortunate indeed today in these days of seeming world chaos. This chaos is man-made, and only knowing man can know peace, for sensing man shall ever experience the agony of waiting. This is the paragraph I mentioned which came through the sounds to fit into our great plan. I feel that those of us who are taking the course have much in common, and I believe that if possible we should meet upon completion of the course and discuss ways and means of extending our knowledge, balance, and inspiration to the rest of the world. I believe there are many ways in which balance could be extended internationally through business, science, and the arts. Oh, how we want to shed the light all at once around the world, but my plan must always be mature, and our plan is maturing, and you are all part of that plan. That is all of you who know the desire to share God's work with us. So great is the light of this new knowledge that those who are unfolding it will soon be ready to illumine the world with the light of their own knowing. The next series of lessons continue to explain the source of all energy and to demonstrate that your control of it lies in the measure of your desire and of your knowing. The energy of God's thinking mind creates thought bodies, which you might call mind-imagined bodies. Then the same energy creates material electric wave bodies in the image of the mind-imagined bodies. As that is all that God ever does, or that you ever do, it is of the utmost importance that the entire principle and process of it be made as clear to you as your alphabet. For that reason, the next series will more fully explain the divided and undivided universe, or the principle of rest from which motion seemingly springs to seek rest, or the principle of silence from which sound vibrations spring to simulate a reality which is not in them. Although motion is the most evident thing in nature, God's universe is really static. It is really at rest. Motion is actually an illusion of the senses. It really does not exist. God's thought-imagined universe is pure imagining, and materialized thought bodies are really illusion. Creation is but a cosmic cinema which simulates ideas in motion which we know are not moving at all. When Doctor experienced his great illumination, he was made aware that the time had come when it would be vitally necessary to reveal the unreality of motion to those who had become ready to see beyond the illusion of the senses into the source of the illusion so that they could become its source. He was therefore commanded to bring the cosmic age of omniscient knowers and omnipotent thinkers into being, to uplift the human race one stage higher in its unfolding. The transcending human of the coming cosmic age is he who has become fully aware of the illusion of matter and motion, and can thus unbind himself from the effects of matter and motion to dwell only in their source as co-creator of the illusion, knowing it for what it is. God's commands and the instructions of the delivery of the divine Iliad message are of ever-present thoughts, and now that your own glorious letters are coming back to us, revealing such a depth of understanding, it is a small wonder that our happiness knows no bounds as we read your daily letters. To know what already you are able to answer so many previously baffling questions in the light of your own knowing, and a truly comprehending at last the underlying principle of the cosmos that are being unfolded to you through lessons you can study in the quietness of your own room. To know these things are our greatest daily blessings, for it is the fulfillment of God's message for all of us who live but to reveal cosmic love. With love and gratitude for your companionship in this world, I am sincerely Lau Russell. End of lesson. Lesson number 17. We add one more idea, the fulcrum and the lever. Before continuing our long journey from matter of earth to its source behind the scenes in the invisible universe, I cannot restrain myself from telling you the great satisfaction it is giving us to hear how gloriously you are even now applying it to your lives. Our greatest desire is to worthily fulfill our purpose. Your letters convince us that we are, for when the little part of the journey you have already traveled has revealed so much to you already, what a wonderful thing it will be when you actually know that complexity is but the multiplied illusion you have been limited to during past ages, and that behind the scenes is the real simplicity of one, centering and extended two, which will dissolve all complexity from your thinking forever. I will continue to dwell upon energy and its source, also its expression in the divided universe, for quite a little time until you begin to be able to automatically forget material effect the farther you go on our little journey back to the undivided and unchanging source. There is no more important thing for you to know than the source of energy you use for operating your material body and for motivating the thought bodies you create in your imaginings before giving them material bodies, and for manifesting all mechanical expressions ranging from lifting a feather to moving a locomotive or a mountain. There is only one source of energy and one mechanical principle by means of which it can be used. That is what I must make clear to you, and I must dwell upon it until it is made so clear by words and diagrams that you can apply it comprehensively to your creative thinking with greater power. Likewise, the chemist, electrical engineer, inventor, or physicist can apply it to the simplification of his mechanical processes. You will make a good beginning in building up the comprehension by which deep thought to the following postulates and axioms which go to the root of the subject. These postulates really define energy, but no definition of energy can explain it without repeat amplification because orthodox thinking has made it impossible. Postulates concerning energy. God is all. In him is all energy, all knowledge, and all being. God created his universe with energy, which is in him, not in his creation. The energy of God's mind is desire to give expression to idea of his knowing by giving imagined form to his being. Mind knows and thinks what it knows. Energy lies in mind knowing, but is expressed or manifested by mind thinking. Energy is still. God's magnetic light is at rest. God's mind is the fulcrum upon which the lever of his electric thinking pulsates to give heartbeat to his universal body, created by him in the image of his knowing. Energy lies in cause, but is expressed in effect. Axioms. Effect cannot be its own cause. Thinking cannot be the knowing which it expresses. The product of energy cannot be energy. The moving lever cannot be its own fulcrum. Simulated idea in moving forms cannot be the idea it simulates. Conclusion. Creation is the product of God's mind knowing. It is made manifest by mind thinking. The product of mind, created by the energy of mind, cannot be the mind which created it. As I said above, these definitions cannot define with comprehension unless amplified patiently and simply and with much repetition of example. This I will do in everyday language without the use of any scientific terminology whatsoever, for that is not necessary. If you will review the past lessons, you will find that I have not yet used any scientific terms which are not a part of everyday common usage, except possibly the word polarity. Such words as gravitation are scientific terms which everybody understands, and such words only will be used. If, however, I am obliged to use any other words, I will as clearly define them as I define polarity to be the division of an equilibrium into pairs of opposite conditions. You will never have to look up any strange word of the scientific vocabulary in a terminology dictionary. Before resuming our subject of energy, which motivates the universal heartbeat, I wish you to realize that we have not yet complexed the foundations of scientific principle beyond the principle of the Divine Trinity, nor will I do so unto the very end, for nature does not complex it. Nature multiplies the three of the Divine Trinity into wave octaves of 9, which are the same 3 multiplied by 3, to create the illusion of a three-dimensional universe by the seeming projection of light radially. And so you will find the simplicity of 3 unto the very end in all things. Waves of light are the very basic exemplification of the Divine Trinity, and the universe consists of light waves only. When we begin to build octave wave fields and explain wave structure, you will find nothing more complex in principle than you are perfectly familiar with in the working of the old-fashioned kitchen pump handle, which our forefathers had to use constantly to pump water into the kitchen from the well. That principle is all that God or you have to use in creating material bodies, the principle of the Divine Trinity of energy and energy expression, which underlies all unfolding, refolding things. I am sure that you will not say that you cannot comprehend that simple principle of the pump. Therefore, you can comprehend the most complex electrical, chemical, or mathematical effects, or how God unfolds and refolds suns and planets by the same process and principle with which he unfolds and refolds the daisy in the meadow. You have always heard that matter emerges from space in some mysterious manner, and that space again swallows up matter and absorbs it into itself. That is true, but the way that matter emerges from space is the same way that the pump handle draws water from the well. The only difference is that there are hundreds of billions of wave pump handles pumping furiously in every cubic inch of matter to pump light out of the well of space instead of water out of a well on Earth. The motivating principle is the same, so also are the mechanics. I will now give you a series of simple ideas to ponder over ideas which are steps in trying to comprehend how desire of mind manufactures thought-imagined bodies which are subsequently given material bodies. I use the word manufacture purposely instead of creates, for the process is as much one of manufacture as any product of a factory is. By using this word, however, it will accentuate that fact to you, and I wanted to do so for a reason which will be self-evident as we progress. I will number the ideas as we build up the structure of the whole process. Regarding the kitchen pump, idea number 1. I have diagrammed a pump handle in figure 28. Study it carefully and note that all of it does moves up and down except one point marked A. The one point is motionless, still unchanging. That still point is on the equator, which divides the polarity of its two compressed and expanded extensions, which I have marked B and C. That one still immovable point is called the fulcrum, and the two extensions, which are the handle of the pump, are known as the lever. Idea number 2. All of the energy which that moving pump handle manifests is in its immovable fulcrum. Without the fulcrum, there could be no motion to express power, therefore energy could not be expressed. The power of stillness. Idea number 3, ask yourself where you could logically place the source of expressed energy in the fulcrum and the lever. Could it possibly be in the moving lever, if the lever could not move without a fulcrum? Your answer could only be that the energy is supplied in the fulcrum and extended to the lever to manifest the power of the fulcrum. Idea number 4. In figure 29, I have diagrammed a wave. No matter whether it is a wave of water, a sound wave, a radio wave, or the waves of an electric current, you will note that it is just like the fulcrum and lever which constitute a pump handle. Its fulcrum is fixed, immovable, still and unchanging. Its lever extends to both sides of its equator, the wave axis, just as the lever of the pump handle extends. Idea number 5. Vision in your memory the troughs and crest of the familiar waves of the ocean. The crest of each wave interchanges with the trough, which is its oppositely sex-conditioned mate. Troughs and crest are sequentially interchanging through their equators. Each alternately becomes the other, but in reverse. Figure 30 is the pump handle showing its wave crest and trough reversed. Positive and negative conditions interchange at their equator, and each become the other by reversing their direction of motion, just as life and death and every other pair of opposites. Figure 31 exemplifies the same principle in the wave. Idea number 6. If you comprehend how the wave principle works by thrusting a piston in one direction and pulling it back in the opposite direction, you can comprehend the heartbeat of this electric universe of light waves, for light waves pump in exactly the same way. The top of the pump handle is the crest of every electric wave, sound wave, radio wave, water wave, or any other kind of wave. Idea number 7. There is a piston on the wave of your pump handle, which you can see, but there is an invisible piston on every wave of every kind in nature which you cannot see. Idea number 8. In the undivided universe there are no waves. Therefore, there are no pistons, no polarization into pairs of opposite conditions. In such an equilibrium, motion is impossible, for even the slightest motion means the development of polarity. And polarity means two unbalanced conditions which seek balance in each other through the motion of interchanging each other's condition. That search for balance through the motion of interchange is the expression of energy which is not in motion at all, but is really in the equilibrium of the undivided universe. To illustrate my meaning, see Figure 32 and 33. Figure 32 represents the calm surface of the ocean. All the ocean's energy is in that stillness, waiting to be expressed, just as all the violence of exploding dynamite is in the unexploded stick, or as the whole oak tree is in the unfolded seed. The moment that equilibrium of the ocean is disturbed by being divided into two opposite conditions, the dynamic electric universe of two-wave motion replaces the static condition of rest. Electric wave pistons then pump all the energy measured out to them by the heartbeat of the universe. Each wave is geared to the universal heartbeat, so each wave then does its share in keeping this sexed electric universe of motion from disappearing into its own equilibrium, as it immediately would if all motion ceased. In Figure 33, the same ships which floated motionlessly upon the undivided calm as in Figure 32 are tossed about like matchsticks by the tremendous conflict which is now going on because of the sex passions of divided father and motherhood of gravitation and radiation, which are seeking balance with each other through each other. What is actually happening is that the two unbalanced sex conditions are seeking voidance of their opposed conditions by interchanging equally with each other. The divided seeks the undivided. When the two opposed conditions become undivided as one, their sex passions are satisfied. Figure 32 represents this satisfied condition of an equilibrium in which motion is impossible. In Figure 32, every point upon the ocean surface is equal in respect to both gravitation and radiation. Each point is the same distance from the Earth's center of gravity. That means that each point is 15 pounds pressure per square inch. Idea number 9. The difference between the two effects in Figure 32 and 33 tell you what electricity is. Electricity is motion. Without motion, there is no electric expression, no waves, no piston, no pumps. The measure of electric force expressed is the measure of the strains and tensions set up by dividing one condition into two, and an equal strain or tension in the desire of the two to become one. Electricity expresses itself in the north-south dynamic direction only. See Figure 16 on page 175. The amplitude of every nature point directly toward and away from the center of gravity. Falling rain, for example, falls directly toward the Earth's center, and rising water vapor returns upon the same radial lines. That is an expression of electrical energy, for the falling rain is charging the planet and discharging space, while the rising vapor is charging space and discharging the Earth. When water vapor rises to a level of equal pressure, it then floats upon its static diameter, which parallels the Earth's surface. Electric expression then ceases, for there are no waves or wave pistons on the static level which are equal in distance from the Earth's center. Idea number 10. In order to better comprehend what I mean by the strains and stresses of electric pressures which cause sex passion in nature, imagine elastic bands stretching from the center of gravity to every point of an ocean wave. In a wave, these elastics would be unequal in length. Therefore, there would be a greater strain on some than others. Upon the calm ocean, there is no such inequality. Therefore, there would be no unbalance. All stress and strains would cease as though there never were. In your own business and social life, you may express yourself as dynamically as you choose, so long as you balance each opposite with each other. But the moment you unbalance them unequally, you will have to pay the price of breaking God's inviolate law. Business or matrimonial sex unbalanced suffer alike. Giving and regiving must be equal and opposite, else business crash, homes break up, friendships cease, and many and varied ill effects the body which could not have happened if giving and regiving were equal and balanced. If your social, business, or sex life is not balanced, you can never find rest, peace, or happiness. That would be impossible, for any residue of unbalance left over from your greatest efforts to balance them would prevent you finding happiness, peace, or rest. To express your life dynamically, you must be strong in your knowing of God's law, otherwise it will react against you mightily. That is as true of the chemical elements, or even of musical tones, as it is of humans, for it is God's law and has no exception. If you do not balance your taking by your giving, that residue of unbalance will make happiness impossible, where indeed you may have the greatest of happiness by balancing them. In Figure 34, we have an example of perfect balance, which results from a perfectly balanced transaction in nature. It is a cube crystal of sodium chloride, which is the result of a balanced union of sodium and chlorine, as exemplified in Figure 35. Sodium is the positive and chlorine is a negative. They are perfectly balanced sex mates, and their union voids both as dynamic opposites. The cube crystal exemplifies your happiness resulting from a balanced transaction. In it there is no residue of unbalance, as there is no residue of unbalance in your business and personal transaction when there is an equal interchange. Therefore, peace, happiness, and health are only possible when one is spiritually and physically in balance. Sodium and iodine, or sodium and bromide, would make good mates, but in each would be the residue of unbalance, which would show in their crystallization by distorted cubes of sodium iodide or sodium bromide. In Figure 35, you will note that the static and dynamic diameters are at 90 degrees from each other. In sodium iodide, they would be less than 90, and in sodium bromide, they would be less still. In a like residue of unbalance lies all of your troubles of business, health, or social relationship. With such a residue, you are out of tune with yourself and all things else. While speaking about being out of tune with your environment or associates, I will use a musical tone to exemplify more specifically what I mean by words residue of unbalance. Figure 36 represents the A string of a harp. That string is only one of a whole octave group. If you pluck it, as in Figure 37, it will vibrate between its positive and negative divisions, as sodium and chlorine do in Figure 35. The string is now expressing itself dynamically, for sound extends from its silence. Suppose, however, that its vibrations do not balance with the vibrations of the other strings of its octave. It is then out of tune with them. It can never be satisfied with its own accomplishments while that residue of unbalance remains. Conclusion. The reason I dwell upon these simple examples is because all nature repeats in its every phase and experience of your own life. The more you know nature, its laws and processes, the more you can work knowingly with God. Life is hard only for the ignorant. The greater your knowledge of God's ways, the easier and more glorious your life can be. Many people are out of tune in their business, social, and domestic life simply from ignorance of the essential knowledge for finding happiness. If you hear a piano which is badly out of tune, your senses are jarred, but many lives are very badly out of tune without doing anything about it. No one can live life gloriously without a workable philosophy. A philosophy which has a scientific basis will fortify you in the certainty of its practical workability. A religion which is in tune with the scientific philosophy will be like unto the North Star to a mariner. A religion which is but an emotional basis is quicksand, but when you add knowledge to the highest of the spiritual emotions, you are surely upon a solid rock with your eyes to the light instead of to the dark. There should be no guesswork about life. Guessing is the method of ignorance. No one need be ignorant. Everyone can have all knowledge, for all knowledge exists and is simple and is yours for the desiring. Information, techniques, and skills are complex, but they are not knowledge. These alone will not lead you to the light. Until you do know the path to the light and walk it knowingly, and will travel many paths in the dark, and your flesh will be torn with thorns, and you will be low in spirit and shrouded with self-pity in the measure of your not knowing. I say to you, therefore, the more you make God's way your way, the more you will manifest God's power to live gloriously, prosperously, powerfully, and with great happiness. For the path to the light is clear, and illumines all of your way if you but know the path. The following words from God's message will give you spiritual force for my meaning. For I say that man who senses but clay of earth in him is bound to earth and clayed image of earth. Clayed images of my imagining, who knoweth not me in them, are but dwellers of earth's dark. To sensed man, the doors of my kingdom are self-barred by darkness, until the light of me in him is known by him as me. Until then he is but moving clay, manifesting not me in him, while sensing not but moving clay of him, knowing not the glory of my light in him. Wherefore I say to thee, exalt thou thyself beyond thy sensing. Know me as a fulcrum of thy thinking, be me as a deep well of thy knowing. From the Divine Iliad. End of lesson. Lesson number 18. First steps towards explaining the supreme mystery of life and death. The supreme mystery of life, growth, decay, and death is the as yet greatest of all unanswered questions of the ages. It is so much a mystery that science has for centuries been trying to search for the secret of life in some basic but hidden life germ. There is no such life germ. Life does not exist anywhere in matter or bodies of matter. Life exists only in God as mind desire to manifest idea by creating body forms which manifest idea. To the majority of mankind, death is as much an accepted reality as life. To them I'd be wasting words by saying there is no death. But to you, whose cosmic awareness is unfolding, I can say these words, and you will believe them intuitively, but you will not understand why, nor could you explain it dynamically to anyone. Yet this is the one thing you must want to know and be able to explain dynamically even to yourself. This I know because of the many questions the deepest thinkers ask me about life, death, reincarnation, growth from the seed, and after seemingly unfathomable mysteries. Platitudes, abstractions, affirmations, faith, and belief without knowing are not satisfying. Knowledge alone will satisfy. There is nothing difficult to understand about life and death because it is a manifestation of the most obvious thing in nature. Let us consider this. What is the most obvious thing in nature? It is the cyclic repetition of the love principle of giving and re-giving as manifested in the Divine Trinity. This eternal repetition is the very basis of creation. Everything in nature appears, disappears, but reappears. That which comes must go, but it must come again forever. Day is born from night to become night, but night is not death because it is born to day. Likewise, death borns life, and life again borns death, as all opposite effects forever do. The concept of life and death grew out of the belief that our bodies are our personal selves, and that bodies live, then cease to live. Our selves are eternal. Our personal selves have not been created. We but manifest ourselves in moving bodies by eternal repetition of bodies which we create to use as instruments until they can no longer function as bodies. Then we create another one, and we continue to do that until our purpose is fulfilled as individual units of creation. The only thing which comes and go are bodies. Bodies do not live, nor do they die. They but function as tools for the length of their cycles, then wear out. Bodies are but waves of motion, and motion is not life. Creation is ever renewing, ever repeating bodily manifestation of mind thinking. Creating bodies manifest idea, but bodies are not the idea they manifest. Likewise, bodies manifest life and death, but they are not life and death. Life and death are but thought cycles of concentrative thinking, followed by decentrative thinking. Each is but one half of a cycle of electric wave motion. Motion does not live nor die. It but expresses life and death by polarization and depolarization. Creation is but an electric wave record of thoughts. Thoughts do not live or die. Thoughts are mind expressions. Thoughts are but mind imaginings which come and go from their source in mind. But mind does not come and go, for mind is eternal. God is mind, and God alone lives. God created his body, but he did not create life. He created bodies to manifest life and love which is in him. But the bodies he created are not God, nor do they live or die or love or have knowledge. He alone can die who believes in death, but he who knows the light of God is one with him can never die. This thought is so beautifully expressed by God's own word in the divine Iliad. He who seeks life without the light will find death, but he who seeks the light will find eternal life even when he walks toward death. He who knows not the light shall die to find it, but he who knows the light shall never die. In man's inhaling there is life, and death trails his exhaling. Yet must man breathe in to live again, and deeply in that he may die. Know thou then that I alone live. I do not die, but out of me comes both seeming life and death. Life is but the inward flow of my thinking, divided, pulsing, and death is its outward flow. Know also that the division of my thinking are but equal halves of one. For I again say that I am one, and that all things which come from me are one, divided to appear as two. All things come and go from my divided thinking. All coming things are living things, and those which go are dead. Know thou that all creating things are resurrected from the dead, and dead things live again through my divided thinking. Again I say that all things are bound as one through light. I am forever creating my living body and destroying it in seeming death, that it may live in me to die and live again. The end of life in death is life's new beginning. Both life and death are one in me. All things are forever living and forever dying, and while they live they die, and also while they are in death they live. Such is my decree, my universal law, from which there is no escape for man, or star, or grain of sand. For all things flow from me, that they may appear to man, and return to me, that they may disappear from his senses in the cycle of my thinking. I am the repetitive God. All things which flow to me and from me flow again both ways, through me forever in a cycle which ends not, nor has begun. From my right hand life flows one way and returns to me full spent as death, while full death flows the other way and returns to me renewed as life. Around my cycle both life and death wend their opposed ways, each seeking each until the twain must balance at maturity, where each gives half to each. But when they pass that halfway point on their separate ways to me, each then gives thought to each, and then both know, as they return to me, that each are both, and both are one in me. Death is the seed of life. Death rebounds from death as life. From death life springs from the soil, and from life death flows even as the perfume leaves the rose. Death gives of itself to life that life may live, and likewise does life give to death that death may die. Life is regenerating death, and death is life degenerating. Light leaves thy son as death, and comes to thee as life, and when thy death leaves thee, it likewise becomes new life to whom or what its impact quickens with thy death. Two ways there are of breath, the inward charging breath of life, and the outward discharging breath of death. All opposed pairs of my divided thinking pass in opposed ways along these two paths in the traversing of my cycle. All things which I have divided into pairs of opposites have within them both life and death, but one of these is greater than the other, until they meet as equals halfway round my life-death cycle. When once they meet and pass, they then exchange these qualities, the greater growing lesser and the lesser growing greater. Even though life is full when life is born, death emanates from life itself as death and takes the opposite path towards death. Likewise does life emanate from death to weaken it when life is strong, until life conquers death to make death live as life. Verily I say, life cannot live without dying as it lives, nor can death conquer life and gather not to it but death. Life is my charging breath of compressive action, and death is my discharging, opposed breath which expands as life reaction. Hear thou me when I again say that life and death are opposites which pass each other on my cycle going opposite ways. Life attracts life to life by its contraction, and death repels both death and life by its expansion. I am not life, nor am I death. From me both spring, and through me both flow both ways toward unity, first in my manifested self and then in me, yet am I not touched in both their passing. I am the interchanging point of life and death. I balance life with death, and never in their changing can either death or life outbalance death or life. Write thou that death and life are one, as the swinging pendulum is one, even though its oscillations two ways in its incessant swinging. He who travels east in my curved universe arrives at west as surely as he who travels west. Likewise does life travel the eastern road to arrive at death, while death takes the eastern road where life awaits to quicken, death is life. So also does death trail the road of life to interchange with life, while life likewise trails the road of death to find himself through death. Hear thou me say, there is no death in all my imagined universe. In it is naught but life, for naught but life and love is in me and my knowing. Naught is there in my thinking which is not my knowing, and naught but life and love are in my thinking. Take thou man's death away from him in this next day of man, give him eternal life in me, by knowing me in him. From the Divine Iliad. Analysis of the life-death cycle. When I wrote these immortal words of the Father-Mother while in the light with him, I was fully aware of thy dynamic meaning and the mechanics of his thinking process by which he manifested his ideas in formed bodies which come and go and to come again forever. I fully knew that any idea which comes and goes is one in both its coming and going. In my full knowing, I could not differentiate one from the other. Therefore, I could not differentiate life from death, nor death from life. To me, the morning light of day, which walks toward noon, is the same light, which walks away from noon to again to be the morning light to walk again toward noon. Knowing the cause of undivided light of the sun, which has no morning, noon, or night in its eternal unchanging oneness, and knowing that the divided, ever-changing day of earth is but extended from its undivided cause, I knew both life and death for what they were, and not for what they seemed to be. To you, however, who read these immortal words without that knowing, they are but words until your soul knows their meaning in God's plan, which simulates eternity, by dividing all idea of us into pairs of opposite expressions which internally repeat their opposite expressions to create an illusion of continual change. That is what confuses you and all mankind. You see the continual change in every moment of the day, in every form in it, and of every event in it. Something is moving and changing during your whole day and night of life to force you to think complexly. You cannot evade that confusion while you sense, record, not but changing. Confusion of the senses disappears through knowing the changeless source of all illusion. To the extent that you know the source, the confusion of your senses will disappear. The reason God gave you the Divine Iliad message is to give you that knowing, and the purpose of it is the further unfolding of the man idea upon this planet. In order to give you that knowing, you must disregard age-old concepts which your senses have built up from the confusion of change and replace them with new concepts formed from knowing the changeless source of undivided oneness from which the divided universe of many changing, moving forms extend. In order to build these new concepts, we must become thoroughly familiar with the way God extends all changing forms of divided idea from their changeless source in His light. We will do that by the repeated use of diagrams and word pictures of simple examples of forever changing things which manifest eternal life by life's division into seeming life and death. In beginning to explain the principle which lies behind life and death, let me remind you that creation is the extension of God's one whole idea, divided into countless many forms of many ideas imagined by mind thinking. The form of any idea is not the idea thus extended. It is but the material body of the idea. Idea is undivided and changeless. Idea has no body. Thinking takes idea apart and gives it thought bodies, which are then manifested in material bodies. Idea does not come and go. It is but the bodies of ideas which come and go. It is but the formed bodies of ideas which appear, disappear, and reappear in what we call life, death, and rebirth. These transient bodies simulate idea by form and motion, but transient moving form cannot be the eternal idea which it manifests in forever repeated cycles. Remember, then, that it is the repeated cycles of manifested ideas which confuses you into thinking life and death, and not the idea itself. Idea is eternal and has no cycles. The bodies of ideas only are expressed in cycles. Cycles come and go. They begin and end, and begin again where they end. They appear and disappear to reappear as bodies of patterned thought. It will clarify this life-death mystery to go through the process of building bodies from the eternal zero in the light of their beginning, through the cycle of their appearances and back into their disappearance in their eternal zero of equilibrium from which they emerged. We will first build the body of a tree from its beginning as a part of God's one whole idea of creation. We plant an acorn seed into the ground. In that seed is 1,000,000 years of repeated life-death cycles. In that seed is the record of every stage of unfolding of that idea from its beginning as a mold or fungus up through the stages of desire to become what it desired to be, which was in that seed 1,000,000 years ago. Examine it with the finest microscope, and you will not see one trace of the body of the oak, yet out of it comes the full-grown oak of many branches and leaves, no two of them alike. That seed is the undivided father-mother idea of the eternal oak, which is about to be divided into pairs of opposite father and mother conditions, which produce bodies by interchanging their conditions. All creating bodies begin from a zero point of balance, which become their equators, extend to allotted measures limited by desire, and return to the zero of their equator to give back the bodies they have borrowed from each side of it. Let me impress upon you the fact that the seed is but the sole record of mind idea. It has no material body, but it has a thought body which is patterned in the image of the thought. It is the mind concept of an oak tree, not yet conceived as a body in its mother's womb. By saying that it is not yet conceived in its mother's womb, I mean that it has not yet begun to be divided from its spiritual oneness of father-motherhood into its physical manifestation of the divine Trinity as expressed by the division into father and motherhood. Figure 38 represents the beginning of this division by planting the pattern seed in the womb of Mother Earth. Figure 39 represents the static measure of desire for extension which is in the seed. The zero of the seed centers the two equilibrium zeros extend from it. The seed is the still fulcrum from which the tree will borrow its power to become a tree, as the lever likewise borrows its power from its fulcrum. It must be thoroughly known and comprehended that the dimensions of the full-grown tree, including the duration of its life cycle, are as meticulously recorded in its seed as are the patterns of its wood and foliage. That which appears to exist in the visible universe really exists in the invisible universe. The invisible idea is eternal. The moment the division of the seed takes place, a dimension of its former incarnations are already surveyed by the magnetic surveyor of creation, and invisibly marked out for it upon both sides of its equator. Figure 40, therefore, represents the dimension of the two-way dynamic diameter extending at 90 degrees from the static diameter of Earth. The dynamic diameter is the equator, which is being prepared in Earth and space, which divides, balances, and reverses the halves of the growing body. To review this idea in your mind, turn back to Figure 20. Figure 41 represents the two extended static diameters which bound the predestined dimensions of the tree in accord with the dimensions of desire which have been registered in its seed. It can go beyond these dimensions if new desire is added to the seed, such as extra flavorable soil and weather conditions. This added desire can be given to it by man who adds his desire for a better tree to that of the desire of the tree. In Figure 41, the division has already taken place, and the newborn tree has extended from its womb in the negative direction of motherhood toward space, while its roots have extended in the positive direction of gravitation toward fatherhood. The important facts for you to take note of at this stage are these. 1. The division which begins to take place in the seed by the electric pumping action develops a negative and positive polarized condition above and below the equator where the division begins. 2. The positive direction of concentration is inward toward gravity. The roots of the tree follow that direction. The negative direction of decentration is outward toward space. The growing tree follows this outward direction. 3. Now carefully note the fact that positive electricity and negative electricity turn their backs to each other and pull away from each other as hard as they can to divide a static condition into a dynamic one. This is a very important point for you to take note of because science believes just the opposite of what nature so obviously and plainly demonstrates. In fact, the Coulomb electric law states the opposites attract and likes repel. As we proceed, you will see how utterly unlike nature that law is. Electricity is the divider of one balanced, unchanging consideration of stillness into two unbalanced conditions of ever-changing motion, which interchanges constantly to balance those unbalanced conditions to express life, and to void them to express death. Positive electricity and negative electricity are diametrically opposed to each other. Positive electricity charges by multiplying motion into higher potential to manifest life, and negative electricity discharges that potential by dividing it to manifest death. This is not the proper place to expand this idea, but if you look at a bar magnet, you will find that it does just what the seed of the tree does. The electric current which divides the seed at its equilibrium point to pull one half of the tree inward to the positive center of the heart, and the other half outward toward the negative area of the sky, does exactly the same thing to a bar magnet. Figure 42 represents a bar magnet, which is a prototype of all growing things. It is a division of stillness into polarized motion. The electric current which polarized the bar magnet pushed both poles away from each other as far as they would go. Positive and negative electricity turn their backs upon each other at the starting point. This is what polarity is, a division into pairs of opposite directions of motion, which create opposite conditions and opposites oppose. If they attracted each other, their opposite poles would be in the middle of the bar, not at its ends and straining to go further. See figure 43. The workings of electricity have been grossly misunderstood, which is very strange, for man has known how to use it wonderfully, but has practically no knowledge of what it is or the why of it. It is just as necessary for you to fully understand its working as for the greatest scientist in the world, because electricity is the pump which motivates your body, and it is what you use to think with. Electricity manifests the basic principle of creation, the love principle of equal giving and regiving, which is the principle of balance upon which your every thought and action is based. 4. As a tree grows two ways to manifest life, it is gradually approaching the 2 points marked A in figure 41 and 44, where that which we call life ends and death begins. 5. As the tree grows by unfolding outward from its seed, it simultaneously refolds inward toward its seed. The pattern of every action of the tree is recorded in the magnetic light of its seed. Later on you will marvel at this miracle of God's recording system, by means of which every unfolding idea is carried over from one body to another for ages. This recording system will be explained in detail in later lessons. 6. In the divided universe, one half of every creating thing is on the positive side of its equator, and the other half on its opposite side. Each of these is dependent upon the other. That part of the tree which is under the ground interchanges with the part which is above ground. This is as true of man, or planet, or industrial plant as it is of a tree. 7. The underground half is the forming body in the womb of earth, and the upper half is the forming seed pattern which returns to the womb of earth for reborning. 8. When the full-grown tree, or man, or planet has reached the limits of its generating power, it then begins to degenerate. To generate means to increase its polarizing power. To degenerate means a gradual depolarization. Figures 45 and 46 represent this gradual depolarization which takes place as desire weakens to manifest idea in body form. Figure 47 represents the complete refoldment of the idea of that tree to its seed. Depolarization is complete. That desire to divide the undivided is now at rest in the pattern record of its seed, just as it was in figure 38. Conclusion. If you will now reread God's words at the beginning of this chapter, you will understand them better because of the diagrams explaining the growth and decay of a tree. Meditate deeply upon this subject, and you will find that there is no part of this journey of the tree, from its appearance to its disappearance, that you could call life without appropriately and truthfully calling it death. Nor is there any part of it that you could call its beginning or its end. Nor is the fulcrum which the tree used to extend itself into a tree any different from the fulcrum you used to extend yourself into a man. Nor are you freed from your roots underground because you can walk away from them, for you are as much bound to them as the tree is. We will talk about this in the next lesson. End of lesson. Lesson number 19. Continuing the mystery of life and death. During the whole course of these lessons, we have endeavored to accentuate the underlying simplicity of nature and natural law, and constantly repeat and exemplify the fact that every expression of motion and every creating thing is identical. Not only is every phenomenon of motion identical in principle, but in the mechanics of its operation. The Divine Trinity is never varied in any action-reaction cycle, nor is its one purpose of physical expression ever varied. The purpose of all creative expression is the manifestation of the love principle of balance, giving and regiving. The manifestation of that principle is the very purpose for which God created his universal body. The measure in which nature and man balances their giving from one side of any equator to their mates upon the other side of it is the measure of peace, happiness, power, beauty, and orderliness, which working knowingly with the law gives to man, instead of the chaos in lives of those who work against it. The keystone of the entire structure of the spiritual and physical universe is rhythmic, balanced interchange between all opposite mates. This is God's three-word law for the cosmic age of man. We have exemplified the working of this law in the unfolding of an oak tree from its seed, the interchange between that part of the tree which belonged to earth and that part which belonged to the heavens until it completely refolding into its seed. We have shown how absolutely dependent each opposite half is to the other half on the other side of their common equator, which divides them from their unity into polarized halves. We have demonstrated the increasing power to express life through increasing intensity of polarization, as positive and negative electricity gather power to continue to extend in opposite directions, and the sequential increase of power to express death as depolarization gradually voids both poles by weakening their power to divide. This process has clarified the fact that the tree could multiply its power only by giving, in order that that which it unfolded would be refolded for repeated giving. The tree is rooted to the ground, but man is, seemingly, not so rooted. The growth of a tree seems to exemplify something quite different in principle in the growth of a man or a business. In order that such thought will not complex your thinking and lead you away from the simplicity of the identical manner in which the Divine Trinity is expressed in all things, I will give you two more parallel examples at the end of this lesson, that of a man and the growth of a bank. You will see that there is not the slightest variation in either the principle or in its mechanics in these two other expressions of idea, which are identically repeated in all other expressions. Before we give these examples, I will quote our Father-Mother's word given in his cosmic message to his new age of man now dawning. From the Book of Desire, Chapter 2, 2. Heed ye thy desires, lest they be unlawful. Measure ye thy desires carefully against their opposites, lest unbalanced desires breed their unbalanced kind to arise and smite thee. 3. For again I say, my one principle of my one law is founded upon the solid rock as equal interchange between all pairs of opposite things, opposite conditions, or opposite transactions between men. 4. My will must prevail on earth as it is in heaven. That which I divide to give to earth and their surrounding heaven is equal. 5. That which earth give to their surrounding space balances that which space gives to earth. By the word earth, our Father means that half of the each wave field, which is concentrated light waves into solid bodies by pulling centripetally inward from within, and by heavens he means the other half of the other side of their equator, which is decentrated into space surrounding the centering solid. Our Father-Mother has divided his entire universe into wave fields within wave fields, a wave field for each action in its own measure, and the electric power extended to each wave field is equally divided between the centering solid and the space which surrounds it. Each wave field is a complete storage battery like the one in your car. the only difference being that the negative cells of nature's storage batteries are among thousands of times larger than the positive cells. Illusion in the making. Each wave field is surrounded and bounded by its six mirrors, which form a cube of six planes of zero curvature beyond which any action taking place in any wave field cannot go. Within these cube wave fields is an entire microcosmic or macrocosmic curved universe of curved pressure gradients, which act as lenses to project and retract light wave actions and reactions which take place within each wave field. These countless cubes of space are the projection machines which extend the cosmic cinema upon the imagined screen of space. Each action of each person, planet or atom affects the balanced symmetry of its wave field. Unbalance distorts the field in the measure of its unbalance. This is not the place to expand this idea here, but the fact of it must be stated here to await its further dynamic expression. We will demonstrate through chemistry and wave construction how unbalance and mismating result in slight to violent distortion from which our explosives emerge. Each man is forever building his own balanced or distorted wave field from which he projects his distortion and reflects others. Every unbalanced projection reflects its discord back to its source to hurt him who projects it. No projected distortion can pass beyond the insulating planes of zero curvature which bound every balanced wave field, but every distorted projection can and does reflect its distortion into the distortion of other wave fields. Remember, however, that God will not allow unbalance in his universe. No man can hurt another without the other's consent. No man can upset the balance of the universe even though extended distortions engulf whole nations with their self-made distortions. Man is eternal. Remember also that eternal, perfect man centers man's bodies, and bodies alone are affected by the actions and reactions of motion. Man, the being, can never be affected, but he can seem to be by the effect of other actions upon his body in the measure of his acceptance of other actions or of his power to insulate his body from them, as his being is eternally insulated from them. What I am trying to tell you is that the eternal you dwells in the undivided, unchanging universe, but your body with which you manifest the eternal you dwells in the divided universe of two unbalanced conditions, which must forever change by interchange of one condition with the other to simulate the one from which both extend. Our Father and Mother's teachings in this message so beautifully clarify his principle of balance in respect to our present subject that I will quote them direct. These also are from the Book of Desire, chapter 3. The Word. 4. He who discords the pattern of my balanced will discords his very seed. Its rhythm he must make absolute, as the disturbed rhythms of earth's storm must be made absolute. From this my decree, there is no escape for man, nor star nor galaxy in my universe, which I imagined into seeming being to manifest me. 5. Balance thy desires, and I will please thee with multiples of their kind. Beware, lest they taking shall outweigh thy giving, and gain thee not. Chapter 4. Consider well my will, disregard it not, for thou shalt pay heavily for one whit of its breaching. For I am balance, as heavens and earth of my balanced radial body vary not one whit in their rhythmic balance, so shall man vary not one whit. Unknowing man unthinkingly counts upon his own power to set aside my one law to fit the measure of his desires. But I say alone, hold balance. Man walks through his cycles upon a taunted rope, whereas his foot toucheth I am there, giving him foothold as the fulcrum of his effort. From my rest at the fulcrum he taketh the power I give to him to express his desire. Without me he can do naught. And behold me at each end of the lever of his action to balance his unbalancing in my universe which knows no unbalance. Yea, be it known that two eyes of man's very God watch over each action of each man whose body my body is. And if man would know where those two eyes of his God are located, I say, seek them at each end of his wavering pole which keepeth him upright upon his taunted rope. For man cannot be without me, even though he deny me in him. Have a care, therefore, that desires of man for things of earth be balanced by desires for heavenly blessings, without which man hath not. Chapter 5. Say to man these my very words. Behold in me the fulcrum of my changing universe, which but manifest change, though I change not, nor move. For I am rest, in me alone is balance. He who would find power must know that he extends from rest in me, that I am he. He who would find rest must return to me, be fulcrum of his own power. Wherefore I say, the burden of man are made by man in the image of his unbalanced thinking. Likewise, the illnesses of man are fruit of his own making. Balanced thinking is an ecstasy which knows no burden, no fatigue, no imperfection. From man's own unbalanced thinking emanates the toxin of fatigue and divers sickness and fears. Wherefore I say, come unto me, ye self-unburdened, find rest in me by being me. Balance further exemplified. Since it is that balance is the very foundation of the undivided universe of mind, and divided balance is the foundation of the universe of motion, it is necessary that we continue with enough examples of the varied nature to demonstrate the conspicuous fact that equal division of action and reaction demands equal interchange of giving and re-giving to opposite mates by each other. It is difficult to realize that we are either making happiness or unhappiness for ourselves by our own unbalanced or unbalanced relations with our close associates. We give too little thought to the things we say and do to our friends and neighbors in our social and business relations. Humans seem to be almost thoughtless about the little things they do to kill the thing they love, by hurting a friend or loved one by carelessness or thoughtless speech which may have not the least trace of viciousness in it, or intent to hurt, but which nevertheless causes the loss of a friend of long standing. Many lonely people wonder why they are not loved and respected by their neighbors as John Smith is across the street. Such lonely ones hardly realize that the accumulated thousands of little unbalanced actions, dealings, and thoughtlessly spoken words have repelled people by driving them slowly but surely away from them. I cannot too often remind you that God gives love alone to all his universe. The more we can learn to give not but love to our neighbors, the more loving, loyal friends we will have, and the more we will prosper, for prosperity is as impossible without friendly goodwill as happiness is impossible if cultivated with intolerance, cynicism, gossip, and other unkindly action. Divided bodies. We whose bodies are divided to manifest our undivided selves have never realized that one half of our body is above ground and the other half is below ground, just as a tree is. Neither do we realize that we are constantly interchanging with each half. Our roots underground are not fastened to us as they are to the tree, but the system of interchange from seed to seed is the same. Note the analogy and similarity of process in each. The seed of all things is planted in the body of the earth, or an extension of it, to act as a womb for the beginning of the polarization which divides the thought body, as registered in the seed, into two conditions. One which reaches out towards the heaven to manifest the unfolding process which expresses motherhood, and the other which reaches inward toward gravitation, pressures to manifest the refolding process of expressing fatherhood. The surface of the earth is the static equator from which all its extensions emerge. All creating extensions are likewise divided by an equator which balances the two through interchange. The entire expression of a whole life cycle deals with what happens to a body after polarization begins. For all happenings after that which affect growing body pattern are the direct result of whatever interchange takes place between the body of the man, trees, rhinoceros, or ant, which is above ground, with its own roots underground, and the bodies of other extensions of the earth which have also become similarly divided, and especially of our own mate of opposite sex, from whom each of us is similarly divided by a dynamic equator. For many long eons the interchange is purely physical. It is confined solely to bodies which interchange willingly or otherwise for the self-perpetuation of each. After many eons, however, culture begins in man. He becomes aware of his spiritual nature. He is no longer merely a sensed animal. There comes a time when intelligence begins in him. Mental interchange then follows, and with it the unfolding of character, culture, morals, and the God qualities which man eventually recognizes as the source of him. In relation to motion, The fact which needs to be impressed upon you is that the motion required for any and all interchange is due to the process of polarization and depolarization only. Thinking mind concentrates and decentrates. That is what polarization is. That is what electricity is. That is what vibration is and waves of vibrations. That is what divides the undivided, changes the unchanging, makes measure where no measure is, makes motion where not but stillness is, makes sound to come out of silence and forms to appear by countless millions from the formlessness of their seed ideas. That motion needed for interchange between opposite occupies the attention of all people. Motion seemingly is of greatest importance. Hear me when I now say to you, motion is of the least importance. Waves of motion are but the outward bodies, the shells which contain the pearls of great price. They are but the senses which vibrate to give physical form to immortal thoughts. They are but sounds projected to simulate the glory which the light of God's kingdom of mind knowing is. Motion translates idea into thought bodies, then into material bodies. Motion records its every pulsation forever as memories for eternal repetition. This important subject will be gradually infiltrated in the lessons as we proceed, for when you fully comprehend God's bookkeeping system, you will then know how all future unfolding of all ideas are built upon memories of past unfolding, refolding experiences which are recorded in light wave patterns by nature. A full scientific knowledge of God's electric recording system will dispel the so far insoluble mysteries which lie hidden behind the secrets of instinct, memory, growth, evolution, which really means unfolding of that which is, and not something being added to that which was. Reincarnation and that inexplicable idea which the ancient mystics called karma. Philosophers and scientists have long wondered how the salmon finds its birthplace to spawn after wandering thousands of miles in trackless oceans, and 1,000 other mysteries. These mysteries are quite simple of comprehension when one fully comprehends how God knits all patterned bodies from light waves with two forever interchanging knitting needles, for which God has but two names, Father and Mother. If you could visualize the Creator at work, weaving his universe of patterned forms and threads of light of all the colors of the spectrum, as a tapestry weaver works with many colored threads, you would see that God uses two needles, both of which are tipped with white golden light of incandescence at the ends where both meet. One of the needles of light extends from that golden incandescence into the dark of space through the orange and red side of the spectrum to manifest the fatherhood of creation, and the other extends through the green and blue side of the spectrum to manifest creation's motherhood. If you will observe the manner in which the Creator holds these needles, you will see that they converge and diverge radially in the form of a cone, and that all of his weavings are spirals which lead toward the spice of cones and away from them toward their base. In this manner the Creator weaves his patterns of light solids surrounded by dark space, forever accompanied by the balanced rhythms of the universal heartbeat. Man has so many other names for God's instruments of creation that their real meaning is lost in the confusion of so many tongues. The scientist calls them gravitation and radiation, not even knowing their father-mother connotation. The engineers call them compression and expansion. The thinker names them concentration and decentration, while the world still continues to call them life and death. The two-way motion which begins to manifest the oak tree when the seed thought body of the oak expresses its desire to make a body for itself could never have begun without the desire, and the pattern concept which expands from the seed is a two-way motion. The idea and the desire are of first importance. The only thing of importance to you about motion is what you do with it. Do you do with it what nature did with it? Nature remembers it, adds improvements to it, and repeats it forever by countless millions of repeated unfolding and refolding. Or do you go your own way without considering what control God has over what you are doing? Do you remember your experiences in the use of motion and profit by them as nature does to improve its unfolding ideas? Or do you ignore them and pay heavily for it and then wonder why you pay? If you desire to clean your room, write a book, or operate a bank, you can express that desire only through motion. The resultant effect is an exact record of what you yourself are, and that patterned picture of you is recorded in space forever for endless repetition. The seed pattern of you is forever existent. In it is the measure of your love, your knowing, your character, and your achievement as a being. You yourself form the pattern of your own seed, and you yourself repolarize it with desire, which is also in your seed. This you cannot avoid doing, and whatever you do can be expressed only by two-way motion extending from your centering will. All motion of God's thinking expresses but one thing, love. To the extent that your thinking manifests love, you are nearing the kingdom of heaven, where all thing else will be added unto you. What you are depends upon what you know. What the world knows of you depends upon what you do with what you know. You can be a world genius without the world knowing anything about it until you express your genius through motion. What you know and what you are can become a part of creation by dividing what you know and what you are into invisible thought bodies for your own unfolding, and then giving these thought bodies to the world by polarizing them from their seed in you. Through motion alone we can extend ourselves from our seed to make a body, and from that body we can extend our knowing to all the world. But motion is only our servant. It does nothing of itself. Our use of it, however, in balance or out of balance, can uplift us to the highest pinnacles of earth or plunge us into the deepest abyss. It should be our greatest desire to learn how to divide our actions in such a manner that the half which belongs to heaven is equal to that half which is given to earth. Our happiness and prosperity in life depends absolutely upon how we divide our actions in respect to God's universe and to our fellow man. For in rhythmic, balanced interchange between all opposite in every transaction in nature lies the secret of maximum perfection in any of its manifestation. Conclusion. Figures 38 to 47 depict the physical growth of a tree. In them, the manifestation of balance in the division of the physical body is exemplified by equal polarization to that half of the body which earth extended to the heavens, and that half which it retained for earth. The perfection of either half depended upon equality with the giving of each half to the other. If the roots deny moisture to the leaves and branches, and the tree becomes stunted or malformed because of that denial, the roots themselves become stunts by the reaction of that denial from the branches, for their inability to drink in the sunshine from the heavens has been proportionally lessened. Equal interchange between roots and tree would ensure maximum perfection of a material body for the tree. If we apply exactly the same principle to the physical body of a man as we do to the tree, the perfection of his physical body will be maximum. We must not think of man as a being separated from the earth, just because he is not directly rooted to it and can walk the earth while the tree cannot. The body of the polarized seed of man extends from the womb of earth as surely as a tree extends from it, for his mother's womb is but an extension of earth. Polarization is a two-way, two-directional extension. The body of the man is always as much under the earth from which it was borrowed as the body of the tree is. Man cannot continue to be an extension of earth without drawing sustenance from his own roots, which extend beneath the earth. Upon that continued interchange, and upon the balance with the earth and heaven halves of man continue to re-give to each other, depends the balanced perfection of the physical body of man. The very sap of man's body comes from the waters of earth, as the fibers of it come from fibers of earth. That is one reason why it is becoming more and more necessary to consider the lack of balancing in earth's giving to man because of the use of mineral fertilizers and other damaging practices of agriculture. Our bodies are deficient to the extent that earth giving to them is deficient. The reaction of deficient giving to man by earth lessens the ability of man to re-give to earth. This law of equal interchange works both ways. Man is continually borrowing his body from earth, and it is just as continually returning his borrowing by the continual ejection of parts of it which are forever dying as new parts are borning. Your dog can follow your path for days because of the millions of dead cells which you have thrown off. That odor of you is part of your ever-dying body, just as the perfume of the flower is part of the dying flower. All eliminations of bodies are given back to the earth for continuous repetition of giving and re-giving. Earth is the positive cell of a battery, and space is the negative cell. When Earth gives half of the body to space, Earth charges space and discharges itself equally. As space re-gives to the other half of the body, it recharges Earth and discharges space. Perfection in the manifestation of any idea depends upon keeping this interchange in balance. Deficient interchange unbalances both, resulting in a less fertile earth and a less vital body of man. It is time that this matter became a major project in the practice of agriculture, else the human race will pay heavily for it. Unlike the tree, man is a spiritual existence as well as a physical one. His spiritual interchange in his human relations must equally obey the law of rhythmic, balanced interchange. Also, his spiritual unfoldment will suffer vitally from the accumulating residue of unbalance which lodge in him by every unbalanced mental transaction of his life. The tree has only its physical body to interchange with, but man has both physical and mental unbalance in dealing reacts upon the physical by developing toxic poisonings, which the balance giving on earth to bodies could never offset. A perfect diet by man will not keep him from hurting his own body by an unkind word given to hurt another, or by an unloving action of any nature whatsoever. That is why it is so much more difficult for man to live more healthily and happily than animals, and that is also why life is hard to live for all men who do not walk and talk with God. This is the universe of rest from which motion springs, but there is no rest for any man whose interchange with other men is unbalanced. The life of such a man is hard in the measure of his unbalanced interchange. Conversely, the life of any man who works knowingly with God and balances his mental and physical interchange is relatively easy. For such a man will forever know rest and peace, and the world will glorify him the more he reflects the light of love in his actions. As a final example, we will consider this law of equal interchange in a business transaction between men who operate a bank. Again, I say that every diagram from 38 to 47, which applies to the growing tree, also applies to the operation and growth of a bank. The bank idea is part of the whole idea of creation, just as the oak tree is another idea. The plan and pattern of the bank idea is in its seed. The bank begins to grow from its seed by dividing its substance into its two polar conditions, just as the tree begins to grow. So long as its capital is static in its seed, the bank cannot grow. In order to grow, it must become dynamic by extending its opposite direction from its equator, and those extensions must be equal. The growth of the bank begins when it extends credit to a borrower to make a body for the borrower's idea, just as the oak tree makes a body for its idea by borrowing it from below its equator. If the extended credit above the equator is $100,000, a simultaneous debit of $100,000 is recorded below the equator. That interchange is equal and opposite and is always kept in balance. Every reduction or increase on the credit side of the equator is balanced on its debit side. Suppose, however, that the creditor failed after repaying $40,000. There would then remain a deficit of $60,000, which illustrates what we mean by a residue of unbalance. One such failure upon the part of the bank to give more care to investigation of the borrower, or one such accidental failure on the part of a sound borrower, would not destroy the bank, for it is too small a thing to hurt a strong bank. The accumulation of very many such unbalanced residues would, however, temporarily weaken it by hurting its growth and prestige, and would eventually destroy it unless its rhythmic balance of credit and debits was restored. If you would take this example to yourself and apply it all down the line to your physical interchanging with material bodies of earth and spiritual interchange with thought bodies of heaven, you would find that seemingly insurmountable hurdles of life would be but molehills for your joyous overcoming, and ills of the body would not touch you. And if they did, you would know that you yourself caused them by little unnoticed accumulations of unbalanced residue. Knowing that, you would talk to God about in your meditations, and thus take on his rest and peace, which would soon normalize your balance and attune it to the rhythm of God's heartbeat. I say to you, therefore, that knowledge of your physical and spiritual relationship to God and his universe gives you a power to meet the many great problems of life, to face its many hurdles fearlessly, and find your path upward to your own desired mountaintop unerringly, that is denied to those of lesser knowing. Find, therefore, within yourself the fulcrum of your own power. Find it by seeking deeper knowing. All knowledge exists. It is yours for the desiring. Likewise, all power exists. It is also yours for the asking. There is naught but good in all God's universe. If you find other than good anywhere, you have made it yourself. God did not make it or give it to you. God is love, and he gives naught but love to you. End of lesson. Lesson number 20. Students' deeper questions answered. It is deeply gratifying to us that more and more students are finding that the answers to all situations in which they find themselves are within themselves. When you realize that going outside of your consciousness in the direction of your senses, or the senses of other persons to whom you may appeal, is the surest way to defeat your purpose and complex your problems, you will ultimately learn the wisdom of seeking the answer to all questions within yourself. That is what we mean by asking God for a solution. Always develop the habit of thinking toward the source of knowledge, not away from it. If you want more water, you do not pump it from the little pools which have been pumped from the well. You seek the ultimate supply and pump it from its source. It might help you to develop this habit of inner thinking if you will visualize the seat of the consciousness as that still magnetic light which centers its two polarized extensions in the two lobes of your brain. Often when I think of God's words in the divine Iliad message which says, "See me, know me, be thou a fulcrum of thine own power," I think of that light of universal consciousness which is in the center of my head, and it makes me stop thinking and realize that all the knowledge there is in the whole universe, is there in that measureless point of stillness in the center of my head. Then I also realize that all the power that is in the whole universe is in that still fulcrum from which the divided wave lever of my thinking extends. An overwhelming realization of my universality and oneness with God brings with it timeless answers to desired questions. That is the greatest way I know to make you forget your body and to realize God's existence at a still point within yourself, which you can locate as your being and God's being. How often have I completely lost my body and found my soul that way? How wonderful it will be for you when you can likewise think of the light of all-knowing as centered in you, you alone. For in you is all that is when you know the light that way. The diagram numbered 15 on page 171 will help you to visualize yourself as the universal being from which all things extend. Your own thoughts are extensions of your consciousness, so likewise are all other people's thoughts. Think, therefore, within your own thoughts for the light of all-knowing to extend outward to your own thoughts after you get something to extend, but not before. If the answer is not in your thought, you cannot get it from them. Go, therefore, to the source of thought with full confidence and realization that you will have your answer, just as you go to the well for more water and not to the various little cups and dishes which have a limited supply in them when you are seeking an abundant flow of living waters from their unlimited source in the well. You do not inspire increasing respect in your neighbors when you betray your weakness to them by asking them what you yourself know but are not aware of. Your creation is already falling to pieces this very instant that you no longer are creator of it. If you are working in the light of your all-knowing, you are working with God. Go to Him, not away from Him, as you would go to the well if you want water and not away from it. That is why I say never ask outside of yourself for a solution which is within yourself. If you ask one friend, you compromise once, and you will receive if you turn back to God. But if you ask 10 friends, you have hopelessly compromised your creation by 10,000 times 10, and it never will be, nor can ever be that concept which you started with God to extend from the light. The following question was asked by one student who has actually formed the habit of first looking within his own consciousness. In the letter which contained his question, he said, "By continually practicing to look inward, I expect little by little to form the habit of living on my mountaintop to such an extent that I will find my real self and live in this constant peace which passes all understanding." Here is his question. Last week I was meditating over a problem which had continued to remain unsolved for some time. The thought that I knew entered my thinking, and almost simultaneously the answer followed. The unexpected suddenness of the answer caused me to experience such great inspiration that I am wondering if I did not have a partial illumination. Answer: every time an answer comes that way through the light, you have been illumined to that extent. A full illumination is to have all knowledge given to you through the light all at once. Cosmic man is unfolding a little at a time by many illuminations, and the number of that many every man may set for himself. Question: the Bible speaks of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit. Would that be the mother part of the Father, Mother God you speak of? Answer: early mystics who were well illumined knew of God's creative process of dividing the undivided. Jesus fully knew it. His teaching in Buddhas and others, as well as the illumined mystics who wrote the Bhagavad Gita, fully indicate that they had this knowledge. You must realize, however, that they could not impart their knowledge to their barbarian and pagan people who were not ready to receive it. Jesus and all other mystics knew what love meant and tried also to impart that knowledge to mankind which still belonged to the brute period. The pagan world was no more able to comprehend the meaning of the divine Trinity than it was able to comprehend the love principle of giving for re-giving. The human race had not progressed sufficiently far to even comprehend the love principle, and still is unable to comprehend it except for the cosmic few who are far advanced in their unfolding beyond the masses who are still ignorant, selfish barbarians because their desire for taking is still dominant in them. And so it was that the teaching of the mystics about the divine Trinity, of the undivided one and his divided two of creation, became a meaningless and unexplainable metaphysical abstraction because of the garbled beliefs and misunderstanding of past ages of ignorant, superstitious, miracle-loving primates. One barbarian misinterpretation of it stated that if an offender against God appeased God's anger against him by sufficient bloodshed or other sacrificial rites, God would descend as the Holy Ghost in the body of a dove, which would sit upon the shoulder of the penitent one. Such beliefs persisted during and long after the time of Jesus. You cannot in any way compare these abstract misconceptions with the scientific fact of what God really meant by teaching his creative principle to his illumined messengers. Nor can you fit the words of a pagan conception into words of dynamic meaning for this electric age of greater comprehension of the relation of God to matter and motion. Question. God said, "This is my only begotten Son, in whom I am well pleased." I believe I realize the correct answer, but I would appreciate your explanation. Answer. The same answer in general applies to this as to your other question answered above. Lack of ability of primitive people to comprehend caused words to be used in making that statement, which fitted within the structure of their misconception. These misconceptions still exist, for miracle-loving believers and supernatural phenomena still exist among us. The scientific meaning of the statement you quote is that Jesus was the only fully illumined son of his father and mother up to his day. Jesus fully knew the fact himself, for God prepared him as his messenger to his age to plant the first seeds of love for their gradual unfolding in human consciousness. Many centuries have passed, and the seeds have only now begun to unfold in a small percentage of the great mass of humans. You must realize that Jesus gave his message of love to men of the brute stage of man. Bloodshed and cruelty were the pleasures of his day. Kindliness and mercy were but words to the people, even to the children of people, whose measure of pleasure in the arena was the measure of cruelty and bloodshed served to them for their amusement. That seed has been extremely slow to unfold, for man has been brute for so many eons upon eons that cruelty had become his nature. Question. In Lesson 7, page 107, you say, "There is no such thing in nature as evil, sin, or shame. Nature is never unbalanced." And on page 116, and that every insect, bird, and beast are instinctively controlled and watched over. How then do you explain the condition of animals destroying their kind for food? Answer. Animals do not destroy each other for food. They but interchange their bodies with each other for the perpetuation of bodies, including their own. They still exist as eternal idea. They cannot be destroyed. All bodies interchange with other bodies perpetually. The present body of the zebra interchanges with the lion to perpetuate the idea of the lion. The body of the lion then interchanges with earth to perpetuate the idea of the zebra. The zebra thus acquires a new body to give to the lion. Bear this fact in mind, that the zebra cannot help giving its body to the lion, even if it dies a natural death. Neither can you prevent giving your body back to the earth to manifest the idea of the cow, the sheep, or the apple tree, which likewise give their bodies to you to manifest the idea of you. You must realize that idea is eternal and cannot be destroyed, but bodies which manifest idea constantly come and go to interchange with each other for each other. When God created bodies of animals, he created other bodies to interchange with them, and he watched over them by giving them instinct to find those other bodies. And he likewise gave those other bodies instinct as to what animals will prey upon them in order that they should find balance for their continuance. All of creation is always in balance. If the rabbits in a forest unbalance the other growth of the forest, foxes will increase to ensure balance by lessening the number of rabbits. And so it is with increase of birds where unbalance of insect life appears. Nature creates bodies only to manifest the one whole body of nature. For all nature is but one body of interchanging parts, just as your body is one body of interchanging parts. Nature constantly interchanges body to keep the whole body of nature in balance. Your own body manifests the idea of you by destroying countless bodies every moment in order that they do not destroy your body. These microbe bodies were created to return your body to the earth at the time of its refolding. While your body is vital enough for you to absorb or destroy them, it will do so. But countless other millions are waiting to eventually fulfill their purpose in obedience to natural law. You must realize that a perpetual chemical transformation is forever taking place in nature in order that bodies may be created to manifest idea. You could not have a body otherwise, nor could the tree or meadow grass or the grape on the vine. God's plan of procedure in this respect is briefly the division of all bodies into three qualities which we know of as the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdom. The mineral kingdom comes first. God creates minerals by creating suns to act as crucibles for melting them. They are then set out to cool in the form of hot planets, such as Mercury, which is all mineral and still so hot that copper could melt on its surface. Then Venus, which is cooled sufficiently for water to appear and allow the extension of vegetable life from the mineral. Then hundreds of millions of years later, vegetables and mineral kingdoms interchange with the help of water, and animal life extends from that in a slow beginning as vegetable life appeared. As all three kingdoms interchange with each other, their mutual interchanging forms bodies containing all three in sufficient balance to perpetuate the ideas which gradually become manifested through such interchange of giving for regiving. Every manifestation of such interchange is a manifestation of the love principle which nature or man can violate if they choose but at their peril. If the heavens give insufficient rain, the earth regives insufficiently of vapors for regiving. Deserts do not give clouds to heavens, but forests and rivers do. Likewise, if man upsets the balance of productivity in oceans by wholesale netting, or of soil erosion by wrong planting methods, or of bird life by taking more than his needs, he suffers from his overtaking until nature restores the balance he has upset. Perhaps you might get a better idea of the working of nature than the idea you propounded in your question if you will think of all interchange of every nature's God. Man learns by his hard experience in taking more than he gives. He himself suffers for the unbalance he has caused, but that suffering leads to the correction of his unbalancing by hard labor and deprivation. These ills of man's making are good because they lead to good. It is as good that the lion has its zebra as that the bird has its worm. Without that interchange, there would be no grass for the cow and no milk for the children. Without that balanced interchange of mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdom, this planet would become a stony, metallic, barren desert floating in the skies. There would be no longer the sounds of singing birds, nor worms for them, nor grass for the cow, no children to need milk. God's creation is all good. No part of it is bad, nor wrong, nor evil. How can it be? How can we think of it as otherwise than good? For all of it, in its entirety, is the expression of God's love. Question. Please define love. Answer. Love is the ecstasy of peace and rest in the balanced light of all-knowing which is God. The expression of love is in balanced giving and regiving to manifest love materially. It must be known that love is not its expression, and much confusion arises because of that mistaken idea. Such confusion has persisted for centuries in all thinking. Motion, for example, is an expression of energy, but it is not energy as popularly presumed. Likewise, bodies are not the life which they manifest. The universe manifests its creator, but the universe is not its creator, nor is the poem the poet, nor the picture its painter. To know love, you must know the light of love. To express love, you must be love, just as you must be the poet if you would express poetry. The greatest confusion in regard to love is a very much mistaken idea that it is a physical thing which is possessed or can be possessed, or that love is its physical expression in material bodies. Question. A recent communication contains such sentences as these. The will to peace is being released by our love-powered prayers, and except for the Cabinet and Congress, God's guiding wisdom, and release through him the unfailing power of your love to destroy our enemies by filling them with the spirit of brotherhood. This raises the whole question of what some call intercessory prayer. You have said very plainly in your studies that God works with and not for one, and that we should not sit and ask, acting not, for unless we reach out for our desires, it shall not walk our way unaided by our strong arm. My hope is that you will expand on the possibility of any, of direct effect, without the medium of the ordinary senses. When you say that desire within the soul will always command the whole universe to fulfill the desire, can this include a direct effect in behalf of our enemies, apart from such efforts to work with God as movements for personal or national reconciliation? Is such a direct effect made possible through strongly seeing the oneness of all, so that our lives become a divine extension of that one? I have deeply valued lessons 5 and 6 and all that you say about love as giving and regiving as an inviolate law, and I absolutely agree that we ourselves should work in the action of desire. But please help us on the validity of direct influence in what is usually called intercessory prayer. Answer: it is amazing how little ordinary human reason is applied to that subject of direct effort, direct influence, direct effect, or intercessory prayer. What you are really asking me is this: do you believe that by getting enough people to join in love-powered prayer, God will fill the enemies with have been made through unfair dealings with them, the spirit of brotherhood toward all, so that they may continue to keep what we have taken from them by force, and hurt them as much as we want to without ourselves being hurt? In other words, there can be no love-powered prayers to God by any nation on earth today that ask for protection from or conversion of enemies, for they are based upon selfish motives. Those who do this are seeking to evade the consequence of their actions by asking God for a harvest of peace and love from whirlwind sowing. Let us consider this. Why do we have enemies that hurt us, steal from us, kill us? The answer: that we are enemies of other people in whom we have bred hate and fear by hurting them, stealing from them, and killing them. The whole world is the enemy of the whole world, for love has not yet entered it. The whole world is divided against itself because the whole world has tried to build its own wealth and power by robbing its neighbor. The survival by might idea is an inheritance from the jungle. The world is in a transitory stage of its unfolding. We still primates and barbarians who still use pagan methods of taking what we want by force. Every man fears his neighbor, else he would not lock his door nor police his streets. Every nation fears every other nation, else it would not spend countless billions in armaments. This has been so since the dawn of consciousness in man. Early history is full of intercessory prayer to God from one greedy enemy who wishes to smite his enemy, or to evade being smitten. Early tribes and nations have asked God to take sides with them against other men and nations. The early history of man is saturated with cruelty. Tribes killed prisoners by the thousands. Men, women, and children condemned countless thousands to slavery. You who have asked this question undoubtedly feel that the world is now civilized, and that the days of conquest and killing have passed, and part of the world is good and the other part bad. The bad half is what you mean when you say destroying our enemies by filling them with the spirit of brotherhood. Let us consider that point of view. We, the American nation, pose as being a righteous nation with no desire to aggress any other nation. In taking that stand, we do not realize that we have been an enemy of mankind for centuries of cruelty and aggression for the purpose of building our empire. We have fought 117 wars, killed the inhabitants for the lands we wanted, attained more lands by killing and sharp practice, and abducted hundreds of thousands of black men from Africa with untold cruelty to enslave them for our own selfish purpose. Do not say, but that was yesterday and our forefathers did it, not us. For we are extensions of our forefathers, and we are reaping the harvest which they sowed. We cannot enjoy its stolen fruits without paying heavily for it. The price we are paying is in the blood of 10 for every one we have killed. By becoming enemies, we have made enemies. We are hundreds of billions in debt because of the few billions we stole. We are criminals in respect to God's laws, feigning righteousness in our people who are persecuted by enemies, forgetful of our persecution of man by us as his enemy. God's law will not allow any man or nation to reap harvest of the luscious fruits of peace and goodwill, who sows the seeds of hate and ill will. We have acquired our freedom by depriving other men of their freedom, and now we wonder why other men wish to deprive us of our hard-fought-for freedom. We call them our enemies and ask God in love-powered prayers to set aside his laws in favor of us, as one enemy of man is against another enemy of man. So much for this country. Let us consider England. The history of the building of the British Empire is red with blood and black with infamy. England conquered one nation after another for her own personal gain, while sending missionaries to the heathen half of the world to Christianize them and exploited them for gain. There is no blacker page in history than the attempted degradation of China by the forced sale of opium, which resulted in 2 opium wars, tremendous bloodshed, and the confiscation of lands as the price England exacted from China to make her pay for trying to save herself from the British terror. England grew rich and powerful, but not happy. She had created too many enemies to feel secure or happy. No one can gain happiness by taking happiness from another. Like America and the rest of the world, she lived by the sword and is dying by the sword. For centuries, England could never tell which of the enemies she created would strike next, and every such war drained her best blood. As a consequence, England is today on rations. Her empire is disintegrated, and so is our empire. This enemy-creating world is a world of hatred and fear. The history of one's empire is like another. Spain, Germany, France, Holland, Belgium, Italy, and Dutch East Indies, conquest, Belgian Congo atrocities, are modern replicas of the scourging of medieval and ancient pillagers, who went to war of killing, asking God's help, and returned to ask his blessing upon their conquest and to thank him for their victories over their enemies. And so my answer is that so long as we are building the kind of world that we have been and are building, we cannot ask God to set aside his laws and intercede in our favor as against another who also wishes to set aside God's laws himself. All of us together have built our world, not just one bad half against his good. All of us together have created our Hitlers, our Mussolinis, and our Stalins. Our class wars, such as the privileged and underprivileged, gentry and serf, capital and labor, and rich and poor, have bred fascism, Nazism, and communism. Freedom is disintegrating through infiltration of communism. Culture is lowering, moral fiber and citizenry is decaying. We are losing our best blood in war after war and are not producing great men as leaders, our great geniuses in the arts and invention, or great statesmen for our fast-corrupting governments. The great European nations of a generation ago are now weak, and our own country is the last hope for a renaissance. We have lived by the sword, and the decadence of world death by the sword is evidence everywhere. Disunity is multiplying as decadence in weakened nations multiply. The whole world is facing another dark age. It is on the very verge of it. The only thing which will prevent the world from plunging into that abyss is for mankind to stop being the enemy of man and be his friend. Stop taking and begin giving. Stop fearing man and begin loving him. When nations of God-fearing men become nations of God-loving men who practice God's way, the world will be saved from world suicide, and not until. That is why God sent his message to man at this time. That is why he sent new knowledge to teach men his ways. That is why he gave to mankind his one law for the cosmic age, now in its dawning, the law of rhythmic, balanced interchange in all transactions of men as in nature. Man has not been ready for this new knowledge until now. In his unfolding, he had to progress through the primate age of self-interest to the spiritual age of mutual interest in the brotherhood of man. Through new comprehension of this electric universe, man is now ready to comprehend and know God, and man's own suffering has led him to the edge of his abyss, from where he must turn back and seek the light. When the day comes when man has finally faced the light instead of the dark, he will then pray to his Father for his own worthiness to live in the light, to manifest the light, and not that other men should be worthy, as your question suggests. You can now readily understand that a world condition, which is the result of millions of years of slow unfolding, cannot possibly be brought to its final goal by what you call direct effect, resulting from the desire of your soul, or even the world soul. In God's unfolding universe, all ideas expressed in time cycles, and you can no more press a button to complete a cycle of man's unfolding than you can press a button to bring an oak tree into full growth overnight. Conclusion. However, do not misinterpret this answer on prayer to mean that I do not think that sincere groups who meet in prayer for the purpose of launching good thoughts out to the ether are not doing a very great service to human progress, and especially to themselves. This is a thought wave universe. Thoughts have thought bodies and can be reflected in the thoughts of other people by what is known as telepathy, which is really thought radar. When you do this, however, it is your love thought which extends from you to your fellow man. Your love thought is inspired by your own God awareness and desire for godliness to be expressed in all men. It is therefore your desire and your expression of love that you are extending from your own soul to the souls of other men. And those thoughts will be reflected in those who are ready for them, and will reflect back into your own soul to influence your own thoughts and actions. Remember, however, that your thought and desires for the unity of man is not a prayer from you to God, asking him to use his powers for remedying the defects of other men. Intercessory prayer infers that you are asking God to intercede between you and other men who are causing you unhappiness, whereas God's law exists and works for you and for all other men, whether you request it or not, or whether it causes you unhappiness or not. In other words, when you love your neighbor as yourself and send such thoughts out into the world, you are fulfilling God's command. You are yourself obeying God's law. You're not asking God to do it for you. You are extending your desire to other men to unify all men. In the meantime, God awaits man's slow unfoldment and says to man, I am a patient God. All men will come to me in due time, but theirs is the agony of awaiting. from the Divine Iliad. Letter. Dear friends, once more we wish to tell you of the great pleasure your wonderful letters are giving us, and of the great satisfaction and encouragement of them because of so many demonstrations of power which are arising from the greater understanding of God's ways of thinking and working. One which touched our hearts deeply was the great success of a lover of art who had never studied at all, but who had been making extremely good paintings from pure love of nature and desire for self-expression. Almost overnight, a tremendous power came to him from deep inspiration. For several weeks afterward, he painted pictures which were so far beyond anything he had ever done before that he himself was astonished, but not surprised, for he knew that something so wonderful had happened within his soul that each brushstroke made him feel that for the first time in his life he was working knowingly with God. His picture immediately received front-page notice in a newspaper and were promptly reproduced with favorable comment in a leading art magazine. This is a demonstration of what I mean when I say that one who works knowingly with God works with God's hands together with his one. The first question answered in lesson number 20 was from one who had felt the illumination had come to him suddenly in the solution of a personal problem. This also is a demonstration of God's awareness. That is the way it always comes suddenly, for all inspired conceptions are timeless. Knowledge is a quality of the undivided mind universe in which there is no time. Thoughts of mind, however, take time, for thoughts are divided waves, and waves are synchronized with the universal heartbeat, which creates the idea of time. As more and more of you become thoroughly familiar with the practice of working knowingly with God until it becomes a habit, the world will know more and more about it, and geniuses will again be produced as they were during the 300 years following the Great Renaissance, which gave us such inspired geniuses as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and others through the days, Liszt, Chopin, Wagner, Tennyson, Shakespeare, and Keats, to such recent geniuses as Kipling, Dickens, Walt Whitman, and Thomas Jefferson. Every man is an inherent genius, and there should be an ever-increasing number of geniuses in the world. You have it in you, and so have your sons, daughters, and friends. The greatest man who ever lived is no greater than you, except that he knew that he was and did something about it. The hope of world culture is the production of more geniuses, and the only way to produce them is to make men aware of their genius. Conversely, the only way to make men realize the maximum of happiness in life is to produce geniuses, for they are the only ones who are capable of knowing happiness. By genius, I mean the man who has learned to live life gloriously, at the maximum, not just the genius who has expressed himself in the arts. That is why we constantly urge upon you the necessity of knowing God, so that you will see yourself reflected in him, or know yourself to be an extension of him. The more you do unfold your genius, the more you will be enabled to uplift the world to the level you have yourself attained. Have you ever realized that if the world consisted only of geniuses, there would be no wars? That is a fact. Nevertheless, for genius in man is God awareness. Naturally, as God awareness increases, materiality decreases, and materialists are the ones who make wars. Have you also realized that the geniuses of the world are those who spend more time in solitude and aloneness than other men, for in their solitude they find that ecstasy which is the greatest bliss that man can know. Find time, therefore, to lose your body as much as you can. When you are aware of your body, you can be lonesome, terribly lonesome and dejected, but never if you can find the exaltation and ecstasy which is in your soul. Knowing this from a lifetime of working with full awareness of the eternal man whom I am, instead of the transient body which is but the instrument I use for self-expression, I have been able to multiply my powers of expression by many times that which man limits himself to when he thinks of himself as body. Therein is a secret of self-discovery. Therein lies the difference between greatness and mediocrity, stability and instability, strength and weakness in man. The completion of your self-discovery should be your supreme adventure, an exciting, fascinating personal adventure of that in which visions versus that in which you sense what you vision. That is the one great thing which gives zest to life, that something in you which surmounts and overrides annoyances as though they did not exist, which sees no obstacle anywhere between your vision and its consummation. Life is glorious when it is all that way, and really is that way when that which is eternal in you makes you forget all else but the eternal in God's universe, the rest of it being a mirage which really cannot touch you when you know it cannot. That is the way it is when Lao and me, when we extend ourselves to you in these words which are the message. For Lao and I vision the multiplication of genius in man by searching in the dross of matter for the gems of eternity which lie within the bodies of mankind as pearls await discovery of their hidden existence in the opacity of dull matter. We told you some time ago that we had a plan for the multiplication of genius leaders of men. We are nearing the point where we can tell you more about it. The world has been decimated of its leaders. The world is not producing geniuses. The human race has become anemic through drainage of its fine blood, and decadent because of burying its geniuses in many Flanders poppy fields instead of nurturing them with love in the light of man's needs. When we are ready to give that plan of resurrection to the world and the method of it, and tell you of God's explicit and detailed instructions regarding his plan for the resurrection of eternal man of his cosmic age, from its burying place in the earth of past ages, these lessons will have illumined more of you to become the light of that resurrection. When that glorious day comes that you have who found eternity within the hollow of your hand to use it as though it were God's hand, shall stand beside us, Lau and I, and look out from God's sacred mountain of resurrection into its glorious veils below, through which eternal man of tomorrow shall find new paths into a new world of a new kind of life adventure, motivated by love, and by balanced dealing of man with man, which passes all understanding. That is our aim and our goal. But we have had to be very patient and work very hard and wait long for you to catch up, for we need you, many of you, for that day which is not far from fulfillment. This is our message to you for now, a message of happiness which comes from seeing visions nearing fulfillment in the race of men, of visions of the saving of the race of men foretold in the message for fulfillment before the year of 1961 shall have passed its sunset which leads into its night. With our love and gratitude to the Father-Mother for your coming within the radiant aura of his message, I am sincerely, Walter Russell. End of lesson.